In this current world, a drastic mutation is occurring on the moon, leading to a dramatic increase in temperature exceeding 100 degrees. As a result, the surface has become dangerously hot, causing power plants to explode and making it impossible to withstand being outside for more than 20 seconds without fainting. The extreme heat has even made the asphalt scorching to the touch, posing a serious risk to anyone who comes in contact with it. With the entire population confined to their homes due to these hazardous conditions, essential supplies have become scarce. The protagonist, along with his girlfriend, managed to survive for a period of 5 years with limited supplies. However, when their resources started to dwindle, his girlfriend took drastic measures and sent someone to eliminate him before they ran out completely. Now, he finds himself 5 years in the past, reliving the events that led to his near demise. Before the events unfolded, he possessed the unique talent of stockpiling vast amounts of food and resources. In this lifetime, he managed to amass a staggering 3 billion resources, with a determination to assert his dominance over all others. However, in the present moment, our protagonist finds himself on a bus, surrounded by passengers, engaged in a conversation about the recent earthquake that struck Mount Fuji, claiming the lives of numerous individuals and prompting the evacuation of their city. The girl in the snug pink outfit mentioned that they had to make a swift exit, preventing her from stocking up on supplies. The man next to her added that the disappearance of supplies from neighboring cities was shrouded in mystery. Similarly, the guy with the shaved head recounted similar incidents at Donan Lake in Xiangan City and at the Dahunan warehouse. It seemed like a strange phenomenon was occurring, causing a shortage of supplies in various locations. The girl expressed fear as she pondered the immense value of the situation, believing it to be worth billions. However, our protagonist intervened, revealing that it was actually worth trillions. The disappearance of supplies and numerous natural disasters indicated that something sinister was afoot, prompting the need to remain vigilant. The girl questioned if it was the end of the world, to which the man in the green shirt expressed excitement at the prospect of equality for all. Our protagonist, drawing from his past experiences as a delivery man, believed that inequality would persist even in the face of an apocalypse. He recalled a time when the Earth was engulfed in heat waves and seismic activity, causing creatures from the depths to emerge. The world completely transformed overnight, ushering in a new era of scarcity where even basic items like instant noodles were incredibly valuable. In this new society, a single sausage could buy favors and people had abandoned their previous way of life. Despite everything he had experienced, he found himself starting anew a month before the chaos began. A girl in a pink dress approached him, seeking comfort as she expressed her fear. He brushed her off, prioritizing the search for essential supplies in this apocalyptic world. In his previous life, he had dedicated all his time to finding resources, and he knew that would be crucial once again. He is a diligent worker at Walmart, always planning ahead. When his boss informs him of a salary cut, he accepts it with grace, despite the fact that the boss had abandoned the store in the first apocalypse, taking all the supplies. In a twist of irony, he decides to take what he deserves by using his unique ability to access a spatial space that can hold massive amounts of supplies. He effortlessly gathers resources from nearby areas, including water from lakes and supplies from doomed cities. With the ability to freeze time in this space, he ensures that all the food remains fresh for whenever he needs it. Finally, he can enjoy a satisfying meal after all his hard work. The system displays the amount of resources obtained during this activation, and he feels ready after acquiring so much. At that moment, 3 colleagues enter the warehouse, which is now empty. They question what happened, and our protagonist confesses that he took everything. The boss is amazed at how he managed to do it and instructs the others to apprehend him. However, as they approach, he mysteriously takes a step back and vanishes into thin air. The 2 colleagues are left bewildered, trying to figure out where he went, while he reappears outside using his second ability, spatial jump. With this power, he can teleport up to 3 meters away, making it easier for him to gather supplies and escape unnoticed. Tossing his uniform in the air, he declares his collection complete. Suddenly, he receives a warning message on his phone from the authorities about strange movements on Earth and the possibility of a disaster. Despite the caution advised, he remains calm and composed. The system displays the amount of resources obtained during this activation, and he feels ready after acquiring so much. Our hero finds this amusing since nothing has really initiated yet, and they're already saying this doesn't mean they somehow know the future. In that moment, he received a call from his girlfriend, Jang Shuken, and he let out a sigh before answering. She scolded him, questioning how he could have the audacity to put their house up for sale. She expressed her doubts about staying with him if he went through with selling the house, emphasizing the importance of responsibility as a man. Despite not wanting the house herself, she reminded him that as a woman she needed to feel secure. She urged him to prove his manhood by transferring the house ownership to her. Our protagonist asked if she had anything else to say, to which she responded that if he handed over the house, she would give him another chance. However, if he refused, she made it clear that marriage was out of the question. Suchan ended the call without a word, reflecting on the sacrifices he had made during the last 5 years of the apocalypse. He had risked his life every day to forage for supplies to feed her, and had even brought her to a safe zone. Despite his efforts, he remembered a time when he was attacked upon returning home, simply because he hadn't gathered enough supplies. It made him question if she truly appreciated all that he had done for her. After Suchan was killed, they celebrated and had a good time around his body. Yang cautioned the man atop her that Suchan's death was a result of his incompetence and lack of usefulness. It is important for this individual to demonstrate that he is not as incapable as previously thought. Suchan was heartbroken to realize that he had placed his trust in someone unworthy for an extended period of time. However, in this lifetime, Zhang and Wang will face the consequences for their actions, and they will not escape easily. The suffering Suchan experienced will be multiplied, as they will feel the pain 100-fold. As he walks down the street, he reflects on the realization that the items he currently desires cannot be purchased at the market. They can only be obtained with money. The thought propels him to take action, leading him to contact a man named Lu. He informs Lu that he is willing to sell his house at a discounted price, but with one stipulation: he requires the money immediately, right in front of the real estate agency. This decision marks the beginning of a new chapter in his life, one filled with uncertainty and the potential for great rewards. The individual reflects on his current situation and realizes that the items he requires are not readily available in the market, necessitating the use of money for their acquisition. To obtain the necessary funds, he contacts a person named Lu and offers to sell his house at a discounted price, with the condition that the payment be made immediately in the presence of a real estate agent. Zhang and Wang confront him upon his arrival, with Zhang expressing her displeasure at being kept waiting. Despite her reprimand, he disregards her and continues walking past. Wang questions him about his unauthorized sale of a house and warns him of severe consequences if he repeats such actions in the future. As Zhang and Wang wait for him, Zhang berates him for making her wait, but he brushes her off and walks by. Wang questions who allowed him to sell his house and warns that if he repeats his actions, he won't live to see another sunrise. In that instant, Suchan, who had honed his fighting skills through survival, seized Wang by the neck and forcefully brought him to the ground, asserting his dominance over his possessions. Startled by Suchan's aggression, Wang retaliated by attempting to overpower him and claim ownership of his belongings. Wang is frightened by the situation, attempting to intervene but receiving a slap that sends her tumbling to the ground. Wang pleads for release, but Suchan reassures him that he won't die easily before letting him go. As Suchan walks into the real estate agency, Zhang warns him to seize the opportunity she's offering, to apologize and kneel before her if he wants a chance at marrying her. Otherwise, he can forget about it. Suchan gazes back and watches the two individuals flee in terror into the authentic. At the estate agency, the attendant offers Suchan some water and tells him they will buy his house now for a lower price than it's worth. Suchan understands the simple plan. They will buy his house for less than its value and then sell it for a profit. Suchan agrees to sell, but only if he receives full payment immediately. The man agrees to transfer the payment and assures Suchan that everything will be sorted out by the next morning. Suchan agrees, knowing that the value of houses will decrease as disasters continue to happen. He walked down the street and saw a poster advertising quick loans. He decided to go there with his house certificate. Upon arrival, he was shocked to see it was the older brother of the man who just got beaten by him a moment ago. Knowing this man would die in the jaws of a monster within days, the man said he could lend him $500,000 if he left the house certificate. Suchan handed over the certificate, saying he wanted another $100,000 and promised to win it all back at the casino in a week. The lender liked hearing this and thought the kid must be one of those gamblers who would sell even their relatives if necessary. This way, he wouldn't be able to pay back the loan. They would keep the house, and he would still have a lot of debt. With that, the lender agreed, and another $600,000 was transferred. Zhang stood furious, eyes burning. Wang muttered he'd make him pay. They were headed to Wang's brother's place. Just then, Suchan appeared from that direction. Wong's fingers twitched around his neck, fear tightening his grip. But instead of confronting him, they chose to follow. Suchan remembers the tsunamis will bring many buildings down, but this hotel in the Green City stands strong. It has weathered every disaster. He knows the presidential suite is well equipped, even has a pool. Perhaps it's a good place to stay for now. Even at the end of times, this place held food for a long while. He walked into the room and was greeted by the attendant, Luke Sinu, who asked what she could do for him. Suchan said he needed 1,000 tables for a banquet. She was taken aback, offering some table options while thinking this young man must be the son of someone very wealthy. He said he wanted the tables that cost 10,000 each and would make a deposit of 500,000 now, with the rest to be paid later. She was a bit skeptical but told him to follow her to make the payment. She figured that anyone who could easily part with 500,000 surely had more to spend, so it was best to assist him. As they entered the room, she asked if he was getting married. He confirmed and said everything was for a wedding, and he also wanted the presidential suite. Sometime later, he left the hotel feeling very pleased. He spent over $10 million on food, putting down an advance deposit of $500,000. The rest didn't matter because when the apocalypse came, the ice blocks he had would be worth billions. As he walked away, she thought whoever married him would be a very lucky girl. Just then, Jang appeared and asked what was going on. The attendant inquired who she was, and she replied that she was Suchan's girlfriend. The attendant then mentioned that her boyfriend had ordered a banquet for over 1,000 people and paid $500,000 for it. She remarked that Suchan's girlfriend was very fortunate to have a boyfriend like him. However, the attendant couldn't help but think that the girl was, at best, a 7, though she did have a good figure. She wondered why rich men always went for women like her. Jang and Wong were stunned by the idea of a $10 million banquet. The attendant confirmed it, adding that many wealthy people do this. They get into relationships and hide their wealth until the day of the wedding. Wang wants to become a mountaineer and venture into the mountains, but she slaps him, thinking she must create as many opportunities as possible to stay with that loser. She imagines herself as a wealthy lady in a chair, being pampered. Her eyes sparkle. She never imagined this scenario. She will definitely have to marry Suchan, the loser, and that's too good to be true. Suchan sat, tallying the numbers. 700,000 for the house, 600,000 for the loan, another 500,000 for the banquet. Now, with his name on the brink of ruin, more loans seemed a small price to pay. He installed the banking apps on his phone and began the process again. 80 accounts later, he had secured another 970,000. He needed a fireplace, an ice-making machine, ice blocks, smokeless charcoal, and a few other items that were nowhere to be found in the markets. With the money in hand, online orders with fast delivery were easy. These things were essential for surviving the extreme cold and heat. He placed an order for 2,000 tons of smokeless charcoal and called the ice factory to make a reservation. As he walked down the street, a girl called out to him. She was a friend of Zhang's and said Zhang missed him. Suchan knew this girl was trouble, always speaking ill of him to everyone. Miss me? He thought. She must miss my house. Lena looked at Zhang and said Suchan must be testing her. She needed to understand how sad he was about her behavior. Zhang rushed to Suchan, embarrassed, and asked if she could walk with him. She wasn't feeling well and regretted their fight yesterday. Suchan ignored her and told her to walk alone. Zhang, losing her temper, accused him of being arrogant. Lena suggested they follow him and see what he was up to as he got into a taxi. Suchan arrived at the ice factory. The man who greeted him was surprised by Suchan's youth. Suchan inquired if the 2,000 tons of edible ice were ready. The attendant assured him that while their service wasn't cheap, they guaranteed swift delivery. All that was needed was a small deposit. Suchan transferred 100,000 to him, and the seller promised delivery in 3 days. The attendant, curious, asked why Suchan needed so much ice. Was he planning an event? He suggested they might work together in the future and assured him the price was negotiable. Suchan replied it was for a charity event and left. Just then, another taxi arrived. The seller looked hopeful, but it was Zhang, wanting to know what the previous visitor was up to. She asked because he was her boyfriend. The seller was puzzled. Was this girl playing detective? What was happening here? He said he ordered 800,000 in ice. Both were stunned. 800,000 in ice. It was true. He was a millionaire to do something like that. Lena asked if he mentioned what he planned to do with it. The seller thought and recalled. He said he would donate it to charity. Both felt a chill, not understanding why. The scene shifted to one of the city's fanciest restaurants. In his previous life, he had never enjoyed anything. Everything had been destroyed, and even a simple coffee was a luxury. He looked at the menu. Everything was expensive. On the last page, something cost 17,000 with a question mark. He asked what it was. The attendant said it was a special item made by their chef. Sushan said it sounded good and placed the order. He recalled his past life when creatures mutated. Folks thought it was some kind of biological shift. But to him, it was just creatures adapting to the new world. Then a girl with pink hair appeared to deliver his order. She was marvelous and introduced herself as the chef of the place. Suchan recognized her as Chef Duanya. During the apocalypse, she became known as Hell's Chef, with a magical culinary ability to turn corpses into edible things. In a world plagued by scarcity, no one could resist the temptation. Yet, dishes made from mutated creatures often led to death. Seeing his wary expression, she wondered if he thought a beautiful girl like her would poison his food. She told him the dish was called Two-Faced Life. It was a meat dish, prepared differently on each side. Suchan tasted it and said it was worth $177,000, thinking how nice it would be to have her cook at home. Lena, outside, mentioned hearing that broom was really expensive. Yang said she couldn't wait to be a rich wife. So, Suchan decided to visit one of the city's priciest bars, knowing he wouldn't be able to soon. He sat down, and a group of girls surrounded him, asking what he wanted to drink. He started drinking with them. Looking to the side, he saw a girl sitting there. Her friend said she was there because her boyfriend had betrayed her, and she wanted to have fun. The girl said her boyfriend hadn't even slept with her, but cheated with an older woman. She wondered why all men acted that way. Suchan said it was because the instinct to reproduce was ingrained in men's DNA and minds. Suddenly, she downed her drink and asked if he was single. She approached and asked if he was interested. At that moment, Zhang and Lena entered the bar, looking for him. They spotted him at a table in the corner with the three girls. Suchan told her they could go up to a room, and she seemed to agree, so the two rushed off. The desire between them was strong. Qin and Lena shouted at him to stop, but the two ran to the room, entered, and closed the door. He apologized to her for those two, and the girl timidly said it was her first time. Suchan felt awkward and flicked her forehead, saying she must be drunk to do something like that. He told her not to leave the house for the next few days and to stock up on food. She said she understood. Then he said a girl like her shouldn't be in a place like this. With that, he closed the door and left, thinking it was a shame, but he wouldn't be able to seize this opportunity with Lena and Yang around. But he slips away with ease. The next day, he takes delivery of all the trucks, from ice and charcoal to banquet supplies. Lang stands in the crowd, puzzled, questioning why Suchan rented such a vast warehouse just to stockpile so much. Yang, too, is bewildered, unsure of his role. At that moment, Lena points out that the banquet crew from the Green City Hotel has arrived. They are laying out carpets and arranging tables with care. Could it be that a crowd will gather suddenly, and he will declare his love and propose? Yang's feeling flustered, insists that even if he proposes, she will still consider his sincerity. They decide to confront him. She approaches Suchan and asks why he is purchasing so much. Suchan said he'd explain later, but asked if she could help him organize everything. Jiang felt afraid, thinking he was a jerk for making a girl, soon to be rich, do such hard work. Lena chimed in, suggesting it might be a test to see if she was fit to be wealthy. At that, Zhang's demeanor changed. She wasn't a weak woman. She could be delicate, but she knew how to work. She started carrying the boxes, seething inside, vowing that Suchan would pay once she was rich. Just then, Lena attempted to seduce Suchan, offering to help carry the boxes. In her mind, she thought a rich man like him wouldn't have just one woman. If she showed what she had to offer, she might enjoy some benefits. Meanwhile, Suchan thought he couldn't afford to lose free labor, especially with all the ice and tables to set up. After some time, they finally finished. Jiang was drenched in sweat, her legs trembling. She'd been hauling stuff since morning. She muttered that once she married him, she'd make sure to take all his money. Lena lay on the ground, exhausted, cursing the man who made them lug those heavy ice boxes. Yang said this had to end now. He needed to propose and start the party before the guests arrived. Lena agreed, urging him to hurry because the food was getting cold. Meanwhile, Suchan handed out extra cash to the delivery guys, who thanked him earnestly. Yang approached Suchan and asked if he had something to say. Suchan thanked her for her help, but said there was no payment for them, so they could leave. Yang, stunned, pleaded with him to stop joking, pointing out that the guests were arriving and there were 1,000 tables to serve. She demanded he reveal his intention to marry her so they could start their life together. Suchan looked back and said it was impossible for him. He had already sold the house and amassed a mountain of debts. Surely they wanted to marry him. Lena said it didn't make sense. How could someone with no money buy so much ice? Suchan explained he was only doing it to help his wealthy boss, who had a charity project in mind. Jang's temper flared. She attacked him, accusing him of lying all along. He stood firm, saying he hadn't lied. She collapsed to the ground, a monstrous look on her face, calling him a poor loser, unworthy of marrying her. Suchan said he wasn't interested, and she stormed off, calling him a bastard and promising he'd regret it. After they both left, Suchan thought they'd regret it once the apocalypse began. He closed the warehouse door, preparing to store everything in his space. With that, all was finally ready. Back at the hotel with Dahai, the man he owed money to, Wang pulled Jang aside. He told her not to waste her time on Suchan anymore and to stick with him instead. She was gnashing her teeth, talking about how she couldn't wait for his performance that night. Wang, ever calm, told her not to worry. He'd ask his brother to handle the situation. Jang began to think maybe Wang wasn't so bad after all. With an influential brother, he was certainly better than that loser. Suddenly, Suchan commented on how she seemed desperate for any man's attention. She jumped, caught off guard, and demanded to know what he was doing there. Wang pointed at Suchan and told his brother that this was the guy who had hit him. Dahai looked surprised and said he hadn't expected to see this particular guy. Wang asked if he knew him, and Dahai explained that the kid had borrowed 600,000 from him and needed to repay it by tomorrow. Wang found it perfect. They could resolve both issues at once. Jang, now pleased, said she had finally gotten rid of a loser, especially one who owed money to the brother. Suchan says you can't get a decent meal in that place. Dahai reminds him that the payment is due tomorrow. He wonders why Suchan is acting like everything's fine here. Wang shouts at his brother not to even talk to Suchan, since he hit him. Sinu appears and asks what's going on and if they can resolve it. Dahai says if she makes that kid kneel and apologize, they can let it slide for today. She then asks Suchan what's happening. He says it's just some pests bothering him. Dahai bangs on the table and says he was only calm because the payment is due tomorrow. A guy with a goatee asks what's going on and who let Suchan cause trouble. Suchan and Dahai recognize him as Ji Kang. Dahai starts apologizing and asks what Kang is doing here. Kang says he has important matters to discuss, and it's not for Suchan to cause trouble. Dahai knows Kang is an entrepreneur, but is involved in various underworld activities. He commands many. It's unwise to cross him. He apologizes, saying he'll return later. Suchan knows him as Skull Crusher. In the apocalypse, he rose to power, even commanding the boss of hell. Suchan recalls this hotel as a birthplace of the powerful. Perhaps Skull Crusher's strength stems from something that will unfold here. Gelling watches him. Suchan resolves to seize any opportunity that arises in this hotel. Later, Gankong took Duanya to meet a man named Mr. Sun. She asked what he wanted to discuss with her. Mr. Sun expressed his eagerness to meet the wonderful Miss Duan and offered her a drink. Duanya noticed that there was something off about the glass, suspecting it contained a drug. Meanwhile, Suchan remembered a past life where he had hidden in a basement with Jang, barely surviving. He never thought that in this life he would kick her, and she would still follow him. But this moment was ripe for revenge. He observed the pool where the two brothers were about to take a dip, remarking on the strange heat of the night, but noting it was worth it since the girls would be in bikinis. The brothers appeared and gazed at the moon, noting its brightness, almost as if it were the sun. At that moment, Wang declared his love for her, while Suchan, in another room, mused that their love was on the verge of exploding. He stands on the balcony and welcomes the apocalypse. The moon trembles, casting a red aura across the sky. Outside, people feel a strange heat on their skin. It burns. They run. Back to the hotel, shouting about the searing moonlight. Inside, confusion reigns. It is night, yet bright as day. 3 of them rush in, their skin already red, desperate for relief. They spot an aquarium, knock it over, and plunge in to cool their burning flesh. The hotel staff, bewildered, ask about Dahai's brother. Wang recalls his brother, who now stumbles in, skin charred and burning. In another room, Mr. Sun questions Duanya's reluctance to drink. Gan Kang suggests they join the banquet. Mr. Sun, holding a glass of wine, declares that in this city, no one can refuse the wine he offers. Duanya's anger flared as she thought about Gan Kang. He was so desperate to climb the social ladder that he handed her over to Mr. Sun. She knew Sun Debio well. an untouchable force in Shanggu, a man who had wronged many women. Now, she was his target. She was certain there was something off about the wine, so she couldn't drink it. But what could she do? Just then, the moon began to blaze, casting a fiery glow on the three of them. They drew the curtain, bewildered by the phenomenon. Mr. Sun suggested they go downstairs to understand what was happening. Duanya felt a wave of relief, seizing the chance to escape the predicament. In the lobby, Sinu was trying to keep everyone calm, saying the rescue teams must be coming. Gankang asked one of his men what was happening. The man explained that the moon had suddenly turned red and the temperature outside had shot up by over 70 degrees. The news was reporting that many people were already injured and burned. Mr. Sun called the minister, asking for someone to come pick him up. Later, he told Gankang that they were having problems and wouldn't be able to make it. Meanwhile, Dahai was in agony. His skin burned. People tried applying burn ointments, but it wasn't enough. He needed to get to a hospital, but with the heat outside, it was impossible. He said he'd call a friend to pick him up. The friend answered, saying he was in the middle of nowhere but would come. As soon as he left the garage, he saw it was too hot and got confused. The heat was so intense that the tires burst. He got out of the car, called his friend to say he'd be delayed, then ran away. The sole of his shoe melted and he slipped, crashing to the ground. As he looked sideways, he saw another person lying there, already a dry corpse. Panic seized him, and he tried to get up, not realizing that half of his face was already scorched onto the asphalt. His scream on the phone startled everyone in the hotel. Meanwhile, our protagonist slept soundly in his room, where the temperature was controlled. Government announcements blared about the intense heat emitted by the moon, with temperatures soaring over 75 degrees and the ground reaching over 100. Hundreds had already perished. The warning urged everyone to stay indoors to avoid severe burns and respiratory issues. Suddenly, a power plant exploded due to the excessive heat, cutting off some communications. Dahai said he had lost contact with his friends. In the only room left in the hotel, Jang and Lena complained about staying with a bunch of men. Then, the power went out, and with it, the air conditioning failed. Everyone began stripping off their shirts, desperate from the heat. Jang remembered that Suchen's room had a pool. Meanwhile, our protagonist swam peacefully, oblivious to the chaos. He knew the power would go out. The explosion at the power plant assured that. That's why he chose this room with a pool, vertical air conditioners, and large batteries. Still, he missed having some ice. He sat on the sofa. It was comfortable. Hunger gnawed at him, so he set a banquet on the table. It was the first day of the apocalypse, and he needed a small breakfast. He wondered when Go-chan would get a chance to gain powers. A knock at the door interrupted his thoughts. They knew he was inside. With his teleportation ability and careful preparations, he felt no fear. He decided to open the door. As it swung open, a cold breeze flowed out. Everyone outside felt an indescribable relief. They wondered why it felt so pleasant inside, why he had air conditioning. Suchen asked if they needed anything. Wong pointed out his ice, pool, food, and electricity. Lena and Zhang shouted, demanding how he dared to live in luxury while they burned outside all day. They told him to leave the room. Dahai declared it was time to pay back what he owed. He should hand over the room. But as Dahai stepped inside, a shot rang out. Dahai clutched his stomach, shocked by the wound. Suchan warned him. One more step and he'd die. Fear gripped everyone now. He got what he wanted, but another shot rang out in the room. Fear gripped everyone as Dahai crumpled to the ground, a fresh wound in his leg. Suchin pointed outside, declaring that anyone who wished to die could stay put. He gave them 3 seconds. If they were in his line of sight, they'd meet their end. Meanwhile, Gankang questioned Sinu about how such a large hotel could lack food. She apologized, explaining they'd recently hosted a banquet for over 1,000 guests, and the next shipment was due today. Mr. Sun, drenched from pouring water over himself, demanded she bring all available food and water immediately. Families were outraged at the waste, and chaos erupted in the lobby. Just then, Day staggered in, injured, and everyone warned that Suchen had shot someone. Seeing the wound, Gankang mused that Suchen's room must have electricity, air conditioning, and even a pool. People crowded around her, questioning her honesty. She insisted it was true he had ice cubes and plenty of food. Convinced, everyone decided to head to his room. Meanwhile, Gawang sent one of his men to investigate. When Suchen opened the door, the fresh, cool air felt like paradise. The desperate crowd outside begged him to show kindness and care for the elderly. The fat little boy saw the fried chicken and lunged for it, but he was stopped short by a boot to the stomach, sending him sprawling. Suchan told the parents to control their kids, or he would. Outraged, people shouted that he was a killer and unfit to stay in that room. As they started to crowd in, Suchan pulled a gun and shot a man in the back. The man fell. Suchan warned them that he may be alone, but each of them had only one life. He knows the danger, but he has his space magic and can escape at any moment. Downstairs, Wang is furious. His brother lies dead, 2 gunshot wounds marking his body. The crowd tossed him out like refuse, already decaying. Wang's voice is a low growl, filled with rage. They must kill that damn Suchan. On Suchan's door, Jang and Lena stood, slick with sweat from the heat. They called out, asking to be let inside. They were sure he wouldn't have the courage to shoot them. They professed their love for him, and their certainty that he loved them too. They promised him a night of adventure, 2 against 1, if he would only let them in. Suchan, hearing their eagerness to join forces, finally relented. He opened the door. They all felt a rush of happiness, mingled with disbelief. Wang stepped between them, striking both girls. He growled that he would kill him. Just then, Suchan landed a punch on Wang's face. Wang staggered, crashing into both girls, and they all fell hard to the ground. Stein Wayne lay there, bloodied and beaten. The others hesitated at the door, fear keeping them back. Suchan urged them to leave. They did. Wang chuckled, saying he was just toying with them, but warned that if anyone dared to challenge him, his artillery robot would take care of it in no time. Tanks sat outside the hotel. People thought they were a rescue team. They left, armed and dressed in protective gear as they entered the building. They ask for a man named Liu Singo. He steps forward. They tell him to put on the insulation suit and come with them. Everyone else wants to be rescued together, but the soldier tells them to stay calm. The operation will happen tonight at midnight in Silicon Valley Square. The people cheer, believing the government has not forsaken them. Mr. Sun offers $1 billion to be taken now, but a soldier holds him back, warning him not to disrupt the mission. Mr. Sun commanded Gan Kang, but the weight of the guns aimed at him made action impossible. In that moment, Jang seized one of the soldiers and said there was a killer in the room above. Lena added that he had already taken many lives and would soon finish off everyone in the hotel. They had to save those trapped inside. A soldier named Xiao Fang decided to investigate. His friend warned him to be cautious, to think before acting. Xiao Fang took his weapon and ascended the stairs. Jang thought it was an ideal situation. Once this man dealt with Suchan, she would claim the rune for herself. Xiao Fang moved carefully down the hallway, scanning every corner until he spotted a camera watching him. Just then, Suchan flung open the door and hurled a flashbang. Before he could react, it detonated, stunning him. A cloud of sleeping gas settled around his feet, and as he crouched to avoid it, Suchan emerged from the shadows and struck him on the head. After a while, he woke up in his room and didn't understand what happened or why it was so cold. Suchan told him, "Your name is Luke Xiao Fang. You are a captain in the Special Forces. Now that you are awake, let's talk." Xiao Fang looked at the ice around him and asked, "What happened? Who is he? Where did he get these grenades and weapons?" Suchan said he was just an ordinary man who just graduated, and he got these weapons when he was traveling in the Middle East. Suchan asked if the government had set the rescue points for the next morning. Xiao Fang was taken aback that he already knew. Suchan felt a familiar weight settle on him. It was all the same as before. He warned Xiao Fang that even though the night was colder, people could not endure more than 10 minutes outside. Most would perish just trying to reach the rescue point. Xiao Fang replied that they had no choice. Many were starving in their homes, unable to bear the heat any longer. Their only hope lay in reaching the rescue point. Modifying the vehicles was too difficult, and there was no time to save everyone, trapped indoors. Perhaps if they covered themselves with blankets, they might stand a chance. Suchan placed his hand on Xiao Fang's shoulder, gun pointed steady. Xiao Fang urged him to calm down, explaining he only wanted to warn everyone to grab blankets. With a swift motion, Suchan cut the rope, declaring himself free. He respected the act of saving lives, but warned Xiao Fang not to return. Xiao Fang questioned Suchan's fear of retaliation, but Suchan simply revealed a camera equipped with facial recognition and an automatic machine gun. When Xiao Fang asked where he got it, Suchan replied, "The Middle East." Then he told him it was best he left. The room felt heavy with tension. Xiao Fang, weary of the whole mess, decided to leave for the tank. Mr. Sun simmered with anger, frustrated that even a soldier couldn't handle the situation. He turned to Gan, blaming him for their troubles. Gan's henchmen wondered aloud if they would truly let this man walk away without consequences. Gan explained that they needed to stay connected for future dealings and that acting rashly would only bring danger. Just then, Suchin entered, challenging their desire for order amid chaos. The henchmen bristled at Suchin's words, but Gan urged them to keep their cool and asked about Suchin's purpose. Suchin held up a bucket of ice, stating he was there to negotiate. One of the henchmen suggested they should just eliminate that kid and take everything he owned right then and there. Suchan aimed the gun at the man, who quickly abandoned his plans. Gan suggested they discuss business, and Suchan handed over the edible ice. They ate it, and its flavor impressed them both, but Gan, eyeing Suchan with greed, plotted to kill him for everything he possessed. Just then, Mr. Sun kicked Gan in the gut, calling him a liar for hiding the ice cubes. He stepped on him, threatening death if anything else was concealed. Gan was unraveling, and Mr. Sun noticed Duanya sitting quietly. She was a modest girl, suffering in the heat while others stripped down, yet she remained unchanged. Frustrated, he grabbed her arm, tired of her attitude and wanting to impose his will. Duanya slapped him, calling him a bastard, but without warning, Mr. Sun tore her shirt. He says he will take advantage of her disobedience first, and then everyone will do what they want. She falls to the ground, scared, and he says she is sweating profusely, and he is only doing her a favor until Gan appears behind him and says enough of this. Sun turns to say something, but Gan hits him in the neck with his closed hand, instantly breaking his hand. He falls to the ground dead, and Gan says Suchan is actually right. This place is already chaos, and people like him have to die with it. He warned them that this place belonged to him now. Those who refused would either go to the rescue point or die here. Upstairs, Suchan watched, noting that his words had struck a chord. Gan had been the boss here once before. They were merely quickening the process. With that, they were thrown out. Gan began to drink the ice Suchan had given him, while Jang and Lena pleaded for a taste, promising to do anything he asked. He tossed some to them, saying they could have it, but they had to obey his every command. One of his men asked if they were not heading to the rescue point, and Gan replied that it was too far. At midnight, Lena and Yang moved to leave, wrapped in blankets. They thought they could slip away, but the henchmen appeared and stripped them of their cover. Yang challenged him, but the henchmen only warned that with the ice gone, they were stuck with him for a while. Those who defied Gan had paid a price for not having supplies to reach safety. The ground was hotter than they expected, even at this hour. They tried to shield their feet with a piece of wood, but walking became a struggle. One of them stumbled, and in an instant, their hand and face met the scorching earth, leaving only one to bear witness to the horror of it all. Dahai and Mr. Sun lay on the ground, their bodies still smoldering. From the balcony, Suchin watched. Their eyes opened, red as fire. He remembered the walk from another life, when he had almost met his end. Yang and Lena say they'll do whatever he wants. But why not go to the room? The henchman says they're being shy. There's no need to hide. The glass broke. The two heavy men, scarred and burned, came after them, their eyes wild. Wang thought they were zombies. He asked Gan if a bite would change them too. Gan, with a hard look, said they needed answers. Then he seized Wang by the neck and tossed him to the creatures. Wang's back sizzles where the creatures touch him. Suchan appears, blade in hand, urging everyone to step aside. The henchman gapes, unable to fathom why Suchan would confront these beasts. Gan, however, is eager, convinced that once Suchan dispatches the two, they'll turn on him next and seize everything he has. Suchan understands that bodies exposed to heat rise again, but they are not infected with any virus. They are more like demons of drought. These demons, unlike others, carry fragments of their former lives. Suchan remains motionless as Mr. Sun brushes past him, heading for Gan, the man who had ended his life. But Dahai, killed by Suchan, lunges at him with fury. However, upon seeing this situation, he is sure that Gan's chance to awaken some power is by killing Mr. Sun, so if he goes in his direction, he cut off his chance of a purple crystal coming out of his body, and this is a type of core that can evolve into a human body. He grabs the crystal and jumps back and pushes high towards everyone and goes up the stairs and tells them about it. Have a good time. He grabs Gan Wang, who was lying on the floor again, and throws him towards the creature in his room. Suchan says that these crystals are very rare. He puts them in a cup and drinks them because this is the absorption method through which the body extracts energy. The crystal turns and strengthens itself. His eyes turn red, and he starts screaming while all these clothes burn, so he falls to the ground on top of a block of ice, while in the hallway, the demon of drought has finished. All their water now that Lena wants to escape with nothing to drink or eat. but her henchman stops her, saying she won't escape at that moment. Lena says they should use Jang. She is Su Chen's fiancé, and if they throw her at the door, that means she won't escape. Sure, he'll open it, and then they can try to steal the goods from him. The henchmen say it's a great idea, and Yang says it will help, but she wants to eat meat first. The henchmen say there's no meat since the refrigerators are turned off days later. Gan looks at her and asks if she wants meat. He has a solution. They tie up Lena and warn her that if she wants to, she will have to do it. Jang is shocked and asks if he meant that they would eat her flesh while Lena. Trembling, Jang turns to her and begs Lena, saying, "What are you doing? You won't do that, right?" But Jang confronts her and says that she just betrayed her by talking about being Suchan's wife since she did that and that she deserves it. Then he hits her 3 times. Even Gon and his followers are afraid to see how she did it without hesitation. Jang becomes crazy, saying that when she is full, she will go up and drink Suchan's blood. The followers look at Gon and ask them if they really will do that. He says to call the boss quickly, or else they will dry up while he is in the room. Suchan jumps with his new body, because not only is it more resistant to heat, but it is also more flexible and strong. At that moment, when Duanya sees the door standing at the entrance, she thinks that it has become crazy in there, and she has no chance of surviving if she stays there. So she has to try her luck, and use what's left of her worth to get something here. At that moment, Suchan opens the door naked, and she gets scared and screams. He apologizes, saying it was unintentional and was excited about some news in the room. Then he tells her that even though he has resources, they are limited. He decides that they just met and he can't accept her just because she's pretty. He remembers that in her past life, she was a very smart woman. In addition, she had a cooperative relationship with Gon Kong. However, although he thought about having her around, the atmosphere now seems strange. Duanya then says to him that she is not just a cook, she is also a doctor. She has been working as a surgeon for 3 years. She thinks that his room is very well equipped. Not only there is electricity, but also there is ice and food. She needs to demonstrate that it is worth staying here on the couch, such a person admits. That becoming a doctor is indeed a good offer, however, since she knows that resources are extremely scarce and it is unclear whether they will live to see tomorrow. Feeling insecure after hearing this, she says that until he kicks her out of the room, after hearing this proposal, he will do whatever he wants. Such a person immediately declares that this is her new home. She feels awkward, thinking that she said it a little rudely and unintentionally. Such a person warns her that her only choice is to behave well. If he finds out that she is planning something behind his back, their relationship will end. Duanya assures him that she understands and never doubts his ways and determination. Suchan then suggests that she can show her determination by taking off her clothes. She feels embarrassed and asks him if he would like to like the video first, as the chapter is over. If you enjoyed it, please click the little bell icon. She could prove this by removing any cloth covering the outer layer of her skin known as dermis. And she was too embarrassed to ask. She asked if they were going to start taking a shower now. And she thought that this place was just paradise for everyone, with water, electricity, food, and no need to worry about the weather. The only problem was that Suchan wasn't exactly a saint, too. He grabbed her chin and said he would give her something different to eat after 7 days of fasting. Duanya opened her mouth to say she would take anything, thinking she knew very well where this was going to lead. She was ready from the moment she entered the room. Su Chen was looking at the screen of his phone with a mischievous smile, just like us. He said he wasn't doing it to spy, but to prevent her from doing anything inappropriate. Then she came out of the bathroom in high heels. Oh my goodness, I'm glad she's a doctor. I'm sure some people's hearts would stop. She even asked Su Chen if it wasn't too short. He told her to turn around and she blushed, and he analyzed it very meticulously and clinically, and concluded that it was perfect. Suddenly, there was a knock at the door, followed by a plea for help. It seemed like Gon Kong was outside, holding Jang, but something was off. His teeth had grown unnaturally large. Duanya hesitated, warning that they couldn't open the door because those guys had just devoured Lena downstairs. If they let them in, they might be next. Suchan, puzzled, asked if they really had eaten someone. Meanwhile, outside, the 3 figures were restraining Zhang, and Suchan appeared in the background, telling them not to break down the door. The 3 turned to look at Suchan, their faces bulging with veins and their teeth grotesquely enlarged. It seemed like everyone was starting to transform. What Suchan didn't know was that a guy had been lurking right next to the door. Suddenly, the attacker lunged at him, swinging a Minecraft blade aimed straight at Suchan's face. But Suchan swiftly caught the man's arm and immobilized him with ease. Gongkong and his henchmen, halfway through their transformation, were stunned that Suchan had dodged the attack. In the chaos, Zhang managed to break free from their grip and dashed toward Suchan, pleading for help. She reached out, desperate for him to save her. But when Suchan grabbed her by the neck, it became clear she, too, was transforming. Suchan calmly explained that in this new world, anyone who consumes human flesh is destined to transform, and Zhang was no longer human enough to be saved. Gongkong, defiant, declared that it was the end of the world, and in times like these, it didn't matter if they were eating people as long as they could survive. Even immobilized, Yang chimed in, admitting that the flesh tasted delicious and made her feel powerful. Driven by her new craving, she attempted to attack Suchan, eager to get a taste of him. But Suchan swiftly responded with a powerful kick, sending Zhang flying out of the room. Zhang crashed through the window and tumbled outside, but just before she fell, she managed to grab hold of the ledge, slowly climbing back up. "You won't get away that easily, Suchan!" she snarled. But then she realized something: the scorching sun was beating down on her, and her skin began to burn. Inside, Suchan remained calm, his hand casually resting in his pocket. Meanwhile, the three thugs charged at him, shouting that they couldn't let him pull out a weapon. Unfazed, Suchan simply asked, "Why do you think I'd waste bullets on you?" One of them lunged at Suchan, accusing him of underestimating them, but at that moment, the sneaky guy from earlier whipped out the Minecraft blade again, sneering that he didn't mind wasting it. In a swift move, Suchan struck the guy right in the head, even though they had turned into monsters. The thugs, still retaining their consciousness, devised a plan to surround Suchan and attack from all directions. As Suchan swiftly took down the one charging from the front, another thug was already on the ceiling, taunting that not only were they faster now, but their reaction time had also drastically improved. With coordinated strikes from both sides, one thug confidently leaped down, declaring that this would be the end for Suchan. He was certain that with one powerful punch, he could finish him off and steal everything he had. But just as the thug launched his attack, Suchan effortlessly jumped up, catching him mid-air. "Are you done talking?" Suchan asked calmly. With that, he slammed the thug's head into the ground. Another blow came at Suchan, this time from the Minecraft blade, but Suchan, agile as ever, blocked it with ease. With a single fluid motion, he disarmed the zombie-like attacker and quickly dealt with the one beside him. Gongkong saw an opportunity and tried to land a punch, but Suchan was quicker, grabbing Gongkong by the neck and smashing him against the wall. But just as Suchan was about to finish him off, something else appeared in the corridor, a sight that even startled him. Zhang had fully transformed into a drought demon, her appearance now a grotesque blend of monstrous features and burning hunger. The atmosphere shifted, and even Suchan seemed taken aback by the sheer horror of what Zhang had become. Zhang leaped through the shattered glass and approached Suchan. Recognizing her, Suchan called out her name. Seeing her grotesque transformation, he commented that she had changed too quickly, indicating that her dependencies must have run deep. As Suchan finished off Gongkong, leaving him lifeless, he remarked that since Zhang wouldn't simply disappear, he would have to finish her off again. Zhang, now fully transformed, let out a monstrous scream that echoed through the space. Inside the room, Duanya was both stunned and impressed. "Damn it," she muttered. "Suchan is incredible. He's taking on Gongkang's entire gang by himself." But as she caught sight of the creature Zhang had become, Duanya knew that this was no ordinary threat. Zhang was far more dangerous than the others. Duanya knew that if she wanted to stay by Suchan's side for a long time, she couldn't afford to be a burden. Determined, she called out his name. Suchan turned, puzzled by her sudden declaration that she would help. He told her that if she didn't get scared and hide, that would be good enough. But if she came out armed and looking so fierce, it might distract him during the fight. For a moment, Duanya was confused, but then she realized he was actually complimenting her impressive presence. Meanwhile, Zhang made unsettling noises, building up to a deafening scream before launching herself at Suchan with her mouth wide open. Suchan was caught off guard, turning just in time to see her lunging at him. But it was too late. She landed a blow right on his shoulder. Duanya gasped, calling out his name in fear, but at that moment, Suchan activated his berserker power. Zhang's fangs, which should have done serious damage, left only small scratches on his skin. Shocked, Zhang quickly recovered, using her tail to strike at Suchan's back. Taking advantage of the momentary stillness in Suchan, she prepared to deliver another attack. Zhang bit down hard on Suchari's shoulder, but to her shock, her teeth couldn't penetrate his skin, which felt as tough as steel. She couldn't comprehend what had just happened. Su-chan, unfazed, sarcastically asked if her teeth were just for decoration, before warning her that it was now his turn. With a swift move, he grabbed one of her arms and then the other. He jumped backward, landing on her back and immobilizing her. Pressing his foot against her spine, he calmly asked if she was ready for what was coming. Without giving her a chance to react, Su-chan pulled both of her arms back while leaping, slamming her hard into the ground. Jang hit the floor with a cry of agony, while Su-chan landed stylishly behind her, his eyes cold and focused. With toothpicks in hand, casually tossing away remnants of the battle, Su-chan remarked that he had intended to make Jang suffer much more in this apocalypse. But now that she had become this monstrous creature, she forced his hand to finish her off as quickly as possible. However, he suddenly noticed something. Jang was using her tail to grab one of the bodies on the ground. Opening her grotesque, stretched mouth, she began swallowing the corpse whole. Her jaw extended unnaturally, and as she consumed the body, her left arm began to regenerate. Su-chan watched with a cold gaze, and as her body started to heal, he said, "Let's start with that arm." With a quick motion, he tore off her left arm. As her body continued to regenerate, he pulled off the right arm next, calmly stating, "Now it's the right arm's turn." Jang's monstrous form writhed in agony, her limbs tossed into the air as Su-chan continued his brutal assault. She collapsed to the ground, battered and broken, yet her body swiftly regenerated. Once fully restored, Su-chan looked at her and declared, "Round 1 is over, but you'd better get ready because round 2 is about to begin." From the room, Duanya watched in shock, witnessing the rain of limbs being thrown around as Su-chan relentlessly dismantled and finished off Jang over and over again. Jang regenerated once more, and it was time for the third round. Su-chan methodically continued removing each of her limbs, even her tail, with merciless precision. The fourth round came, then the fifth, as he began experimenting, removing other parts of her body. After countless rounds of torment, Jang lay on the ground, crying in agony. Su-chan finally spoke, saying that he was satisfied. He wasn't a demon, he claimed, but the small shred of humanity left in Jang made her ask, through her tears, why she was being treated so cruelly. Su-chan didn't like that question. It triggered painful memories of the past, when he had done everything for her, only to be betrayed and stabbed in the back. With cold resolve, he stepped on her, declaring it was revenge. And with that final step, it was the end of Jang. Duanya, who had witnessed the entire ordeal, was both disbelieving and terrified. She cautiously asked Su-chan if he was okay, and if he was still sane after everything that had happened. But Su-chan ignored her concerns. Instead, he looked at her and asked if she was ready. Confused by his sudden shift in focus, Duanya hesitated. "Ready for what?" she asked. Su-chan approached her from behind, a sly smile playing on his lips. "After everything I've done," he said, "don't you think I deserve a reward for being so heroic?" Meanwhile, in another part of the city, at a rescue point, someone remarked that the temperatures seemed to be normalizing. With cautious optimism, they wondered if this might signal the end of the apocalypse. Suddenly, Xiao Fang appeared, looking a bit embarrassed as he called for the captain. He urgently reported that a crowd of survivors was approaching the rescue point. The captain, a formidable figure with short hair and 3 giant weapons slung across her back, took a look. But what she saw made her pupils contract. These weren't survivors, but zombies already transformed into drought demons. As soon as the captain realized the danger, the demons began charging toward them. She immediately ordered the evacuation of all civilians from the area, but the horde seemed endless, an unstoppable wave of death. Xiao Fang, visibly terrified, begged the captain not to die while defending them on the front lines. Without a second of hesitation, she snapped at him to shut up and continue advancing toward the rescue point. She stood resolute, ready to face the incoming storm, while the crowd of demons relentlessly surged forward. As night fell, Su-chan reflected on how Duanya had completely submitted to him. However, he knew he needed to return soon before the great tsunami began. In his past life, the massive movement of people toward the rescue point led to hordes of zombies that ultimately destroyed the area. Many civilians and soldiers lost their lives in that concentration, and on top of that, Minecraft weapons ended up in the hands of various individuals, causing further chaos. Suddenly, 3 men appeared in front of his car, blocking the road. They demanded that Su-chan stop or face the consequences. From inside the vehicle, Su-chan remained unfazed, wondering if these guys were insane to try and stop a car like that. Without much effort, Su-chan lightly tapped the 3 of them, sending them flying. Ever so friendly, he made sure to put all three to sleep peacefully on the asphalt, leaving them sprawled out on the road as he continued on his way. Suchan knew that history was repeating itself. The extreme heat and the overwhelming wave of zombies caused the collapse of the subway underground. As people fled to the deepest parts to escape the heat, tens of thousands met their end there. Peering into the depths of the subway, Suchan noticed countless red eyes staring back at him, drawn to the sound of his car. Unfortunately, hunting for power crystals wasn't worth the effort, as he'd have to search through each zombie's head, and with so many of them down there, it would take far too long. Deciding to move on, Suchan set his sights on the school, recalling that he hadn't visited the place since his graduation from the engineering university. The campus might have fallen again, but he wanted to check the situation. After storing his car in a dimensional space, Suchan entered a nearby building only to come face to face with two transformed creatures. They were chained by collars around their necks. On the sofa in the back, three men sat calmly, observing him. Their leader spoke up, stating that if Suchan wanted to enter their territory, he'd have to drop the backpack he was carrying. Unfazed, Suchan casually pulled out a chicken leg from the bottom of his backpack and asked if they could help him by offering some food. The men were stunned, unable to believe someone had a chicken leg at a time like this. The boss, immediately eager, promised Suchan that they'd help him if he just threw those chicken legs their way. Suchan smiled and tossed the chicken leg right in the middle of the two drought demons. Hunger took over, and the three men lunged forward, competing with the demons for the prized food. However, the chicken leg was tied to a string, and as Suchan started pulling it back, the three men were startled. With a sly apology, Suchan remarked that they really did deserve something so good, but it seemed they wouldn't be getting it after all. Realizing they'd been tricked, the men grabbed their weapons, ready to finish Suchan off. But Suchan was faster. Grabbing the Minecraft weapon, he quickly sorted everything out. 3 loud sounds echoed through the room, and the men were sent into an eternal sleep, courtesy of Suchan's sleep-inducing weapon. As he looked down at the bodies, Suchan couldn't help but wonder how so many idiots had managed to survive in his past life. Suchan couldn't help but wonder if the advice he'd been giving others had altered the world more than he realized. He made his way to the door of the reptile and snake laboratory. With ease, he destroyed the padlock, noting that it seemed like few people had ventured into this place. The majority of the creatures inside had already perished, and the air was thick with the smell of death. As he scanned the room, his eyes fell on a cobra. The snake had clearly devoured several others, explaining how it had managed to survive. In his past life, this cobra was one of the first creatures to undergo an atavistic change, reverting to an ancient, more dangerous form. Suchan knew that in a week, the floods would begin, and this creature would transform into something far more menacing. If he couldn't stop it, it would cause serious trouble. The cobra kept its gaze fixed on him, and Suchan couldn't help but think that it might have already developed some form of consciousness. Suddenly, Suchan heard a noise behind the door. Armed men were preparing to enter. They shouted for him to come out, knowing he was inside. Calmly, Suchan emerged, explaining that he was in the middle of something critical and couldn't be disturbed. However, before he could react further, a girl with gray hair appeared. The men seemed to recognize her, but before they could make a move, she sprang into action. In a blur of motion, she put one man in a neck hold while simultaneously trapping another in a leg lock. Before the third guy could react, she dropped next to him and quickly climbed onto his back. With a swift movement, she incapacitated him too. Just as she finished, as the girl quickly reacted to the Nerf gun aimed at her head, she elbowed the person's hand and raised both legs, trapping Suchan in an attempt to apply pressure to break his head. However, to her surprise, Suchan didn't budge. He remained calm, taking deep breaths, and didn't react as expected. A minute later, with little effort, he pointed the Nerf gun at her once more and asked who she was. Now tied up, the girl introduced herself as Bang, a member of the Special Operations team. Suchan, noticing that his binding seemed to be for more than just immobilization, remarked that there was no need for such a show if she only intended to immobilize him. She warned Suchan that he better let her go. Suchan, calmly eating his meat, listens as Bang warns him to let her go. Ignoring her, he casually asks if she knows Xiao Fang from the Special Forces. Bang is taken aback that Suchan knows him, and Suchan mentions that he once saved Xiao Fang's life with a delicious piece of meat. Bang then explains that fugitives took control of the school, using several people as hostages, and that it all happened quickly while Xiao Fang was rescuing prisoners. She remarks that with their newfound powers, those fugitives are now nothing to fear. Suchan, understanding the situation, notes that if that's the case, it's not her fault. Bang, still bound. I ask Kias when she'll be freed from the ropes. Strangely, Suchan tells her he'll only release her if she traps him with her leg again. This guy really doesn't quit. She reluctantly agrees, but only if he gives her a piece of meat. Later, after the ropes are cut, Suchan hands her a weapon, saying there's a lot to take care of, so he can't assist her right now. He tells her to leave and stop being a nuisance. However, Bang insists she has to attack the base of those thieves. Without the resources they stole, the survivors will have nothing to eat. She emphasizes that this might be their last encounter. Hearing that the group has several supplies, Suchan reconsiders, tells her to wait, and pulls out an AWM from his bag, saying that since Xiao Fang is like a brother to him, he'll offer some help. Meanwhile, over in the administrative block of the school, in one room, a group of armed men wait while their boss lounges with two women on his lap. The boss casually asks how things are going, and one of his henchmen reports that everyone is waiting outside. This time, they plan to finish off all the students. The boss, pleased, instructs them to put any disobedient people on the front line so they die first. Suddenly, the door is kicked in, startling everyone. Suchan strides in, apologizing for interrupting their meeting. One of the henchmen, confused, asks how he got past over 20 guards. Suchan calmly offers to explain, then points his finger at one of the guys and says, "Bang." To everyone's shock, the man's head explodes. The room is filled with stunned silence, as no one can comprehend how Suchan killed someone just by pointing a finger. He continues pointing at others, warning that anyone who moves will die. The boss, enraged, orders him to shut up. But just then, a shot rings out from a sniper rifle. It's Baong, positioned on a nearby rooftop with the AWM. She successfully eliminates her target but feels uneasy, knowing Suchan is alone in a room filled with dangerous people. She thinks back to his orders and wonders how she found the courage to trust such a reckless plan. Suddenly, the curtains in the room are drawn, blocking her view. Panicking, Bang shouts through her earpiece, asking Suchan what's happening. She overhears that the people inside have realized a sniper is targeting them, and they're sending reinforcements to kill him. Fear grips her as she races down the stairs, desperate to reach Suchan in time. Bursting through the door, Bang yells that she's there for revenge. But to her surprise, all the henchmen are already lying on the ground. Suchan is holding the boss by the neck, nonchalantly warning him that there are no supplies left in the building. As he rummages through the boss's belongings, the man tries to bargain, saying, Suchan will be hunted by the rest of his group if he kills him. Suchan simply cracks the boss's neck, casually saying that the others will soon join him. In disbelief, Bang asks if Suchan really took down all those men by himself. Suchan smirks and says he's been exercising a lot lately. He reassures Bang that there are no supplies left, which leaves her puzzled. She wonders if someone else got there before them and stole everything. Unbeknownst to her, Suchan has already stored all the supplies in his dimensional space, deciding to only share them if he's certain of the people's intentions. He then casually mentions that it's time to head to the girls' dormitory. Bang, still confused, asks why they need to go there specifically. Suchan explains that he got this information from the boss they just took down. Meanwhile, in a dimly lit room elsewhere in the building, a girl hangs among the bodies, just beginning to transform. A bald man with a beaver tail appears, cursing about the girl causing trouble again. He wonders if she's still alive as he approaches her. As she drops to the ground, he remarks that Sister G has been pretending to be captured for days, and asks if she's found what she's looking for. The girl, visibly shaken, responds that she nearly died and pleads for comfort from Steel Fang. The man, Steel Fang, obliges with a twisted grin, lightly caressing her back with a whip. She sighs, claiming she feels much better now. Steel Fang, now suspicious, asks if she saw everything and demands to know who took his supplies. With a mournful tone, the girl reveals that it was a demon-like guy who took everything. Steel Fang's expression darkens as he presses her for the name. She trembles slightly before finally whispering, Suchan. Meanwhile, in the girls' dormitory building, Xiao Feng looked at Suchen and Bang with some surprise. It's great that you could come back, Bang. How come you're with Suchen? Suchen noticed Xiao Feng's wound and asked, Xiao Feng, your injury seems quite severe. Let me take a look. Upon examining the wound, he recognized it as a scratch from a monster known as the cannibals. Their claws contain viruses and bacteria that can be life-threatening without prompt treatment. Xiao Feng remained silent, knowing how scarce medicines had become. Suchen handed him a pile of medicines, saying, Xiaofeng, take these. They should be enough. Both Xiaofeng and Bang were shocked. Su Chen, where did you get all these medicines? They asked. Su Chen simply smiled. Like I said before, I am Xiaofeng's lifesaver. I remember from my previous life that there was a guy in the official organization, a force comparable to a human-shaped nuclear bomb, known as the Peak God. If that person is Xiaofeng, then this investment of mine won't be in vain. Xiaofeng acknowledged the gesture and added, Su Chen, I owe you another favor, but I know you didn't come specifically to bring me medicine. What else is on your mind? Su Chen grew serious and warned, a great flood is coming soon. You all need to evacuate to higher ground quickly. The extreme heat has already caused the glaciers to melt rapidly, which will soon lead to a surge of seawater, and the entire school will be submerged. However, a girl nearby, Fang Qing, opposed him. Su Chen, what nonsense are you talking about? Where is this flood coming from? I think you just want to deceive us and then monopolize the resources in the school. She eyed Su Chen's backpack and reached out to grab it, only for Su Chen to slap her, sending her flying several meters. Fang Qing's disbelief turned to fury, but the male students around them began clapping, having long been fed up with her behavior. Furious, Fang Qing vowed revenge and stormed out of the dormitory without looking back. As Fang Qing stormed away from the school, cursing Su Chen and asserting that he should be beneath her, she suddenly felt a hand grab her from behind. Startled, she turned around to see a tall, imposing figure, Steel Fang, a member of the Evolution Federation. His eyes gleamed with an eerie intensity as he leaned closer, asking coldly, Where is Su Chen? Meanwhile, Su Chen, unaware of Fang Qing's predicament, was already planning his next move. He decided to leave the evacuation efforts to the army, prioritizing his mission to kill the Golden King Cobra before it mutated. The creature's ability to manipulate water would be too valuable for him to pass up. Just as Su Chen was about to continue his mission, he heard someone calling his name, a voice full of desperation. Recognizing it as Fang Qing's, he frowned, wondering what trouble she had gotten herself into now. When he followed the voice, he found Fang Qing hanging by a rope, looking utterly terrified. With a smirk, Su Chen asked mockingly, Found your father so quickly, Fang Qing? His tone was laced with sarcasm, but his eyes were already assessing the situation. From the shadows, the man holding Fang Qing hostage stepped forward, introducing himself with a sinister grin. I am Steel Fang from the Evolution Federation, he said, his voice dripping with malice. The tension in the air was palpable as Su Chen faced Steel Fang, both aware that this encounter could end in bloodshed. Fang Qing, still dangling helplessly, watched with wide eyes, realizing too late that she had become a pawn in a much larger game. Steel Fang's grin widened as he looked at Su Chen. I didn't come empty-handed, he sneered. I brought you a little gift for our meeting. With that, he turned toward the cargo truck parked nearby and dramatically swung the door open. Su Chen's eyes calm as several burning zombies emerged from the truck, their bodies wreathed in flames. Fang Qing, still hanging by the rope. Steel Fang watched the scene unfold with sadistic satisfaction, eager to see how Su Chen would handle his gift. Xiaofang and Bang were on edge when they heard the loud noise coming from the direction Su Chen had gone. Bang's instincts kicked in immediately, and she turned to Xiaofang, urging him to keep an eye on things where they were. But Xiaofang shook his head. I can't stay either. If something happened, we need to be there to help. Meanwhile, Su Chen remained calm in the face of the unfolding chaos. Steel Fang taunted him, a sly grin on his face. That girl, he said, nodding towards Fang Qing. She's from your university, right? Why not play the hero and save the princess? Just kneel and I'll leave her there. Su Chen appeared pensive for a moment, his eyes narrowing. Saving her isn't impossible, he mused. Steel Fang's excitement grew. See? You're amazing. Now just kneel and... But Su Chen interrupted him with a calm yet unsettling tone. There's a little problem. Fang Qing, panicked and desperate, yelled, What problem? You said you'd save me. You can't go back on your word. Be a real man and help me. Su Chen shook his head. I'm not the man who deserves to save you. Call the ones who always kissed up to you, those who joined your protests. Let them come and save you now. Fang Qing's fury flared up. You're just trying to get revenge because I called you an inferior person, aren't you? Well, I won't apologize or beg. You're a pathetic loser and I don't need you. Su Chen smiled coldly. Remember what you're saying. As Fang Qing looked down in horror, she saw a horde of dry, desiccated zombies surrounding her, the flames from the burning zombies creeping closer. Her arrogance vanished, replaced by sheer terror. "I was wrong. Help me, please," she screamed, but it was too late. The dry zombies began consuming her, and her screams were quickly drowned out by the crackling of flames. Steel Fang stared at Su-Chen in disbelief. "You're insane. You didn't even try to save her, but that's fine. You'll be joining her soon enough." He prepared for the next move, fully expecting Su-Chen to finally show fear. But Su-Chen remained as calm as ever, ready for whatever came next. He dusts his face with a powder, boasting that it's a new creation that can control the demons. Su-Chen, unimpressed, reveals that it's just the ashes of the monster's skeletons, something even the fool of the Steel Fang didn't know. He scoffs at how disgusting it is, but quickly orders all of the creatures to attack Su-Chen. Su-Chen swiftly prepares, drawing a blade in each hand. In an instant, purple cuts appear on the creatures as he slices through them, emerging unscathed on the other side. He falls to the ground, and the blades vanish. The man taunts, thinking Su-Chen is trying to play games before his death, but he is shocked to see Su-Chen suddenly right in front of him. Meanwhile, Bong and Xiao Fang watch from a distance, stunned by what they're witnessing. They see Su-Chen completely surrounded while the man continues shouting from atop the truck, urging the monsters to attack, but they remain motionless. Confused, the man demands to know why they aren't moving. Su-Chen calmly tells him to stop shouting because it's pointless. The man, baffled, asks what he means, and Su-Chen explains that he has already dealt with all of them. Steel Fang was in shock, exclaiming that it was impossible. With a single move, Su-Chen stepped through a space portal and reappeared behind the man, calmly stating that he had never stolen anything from the so-called Evolution Federation. Placing his hands on the man's head, Su-Chen demanded to know who had sent him to kill him. But then, he abruptly changed his mind, deciding to end it right then and there. The man, terrified, asked what Su-Chen was planning to do, but Su-Chen just smiled. In an instant, the man's neck snapped and the scene transformed into something straight out of Mortal Kombat. Witnessing this brutal display, Bang realized it was impossible for anyone to train and become that strong. Su-Chen was more like a monster than a human. Meanwhile, the protagonist reflected on how he might need an assistant to handle situations like these, as he didn't want too many people to discover the true extent of his powers. Meanwhile, back at the hotel where it all began, Duan Ya was lamenting that Su-Chen shouldn't have abandoned her in this place. She woke up groggily, muttering that she had apparently dreamed of him again last night. Despite the apocalypse leaving little to eat, she was somehow growing stronger, her thoughts constantly drifting to when he would return. She recalled his words, how he wouldn't accept useless people by his side, and felt a surge of determination, vowing she would never be a burden to him. Grabbing a Nerf gun, she declared she wanted to be his right hand, his trusted companion. Suddenly, she heard a noise coming from a nearby room. She cautiously opened the door, but found the room empty. Confused, she stepped inside, but then her instincts kicked in, a shiver ran down her spine, and her pupils contracted. A dry Derman loomed right behind her. She instinctively leaned back, fear gripping her as she wondered how and when the monster had appeared. However, she bumped into a table and was trapped. In a panic, she remembered the Nerf gun and reached for it. But her hand struck a chair, and the gun slipped from her grasp, rolling across the table. The dry demon lunged at her, ready to bite. Duan Ya closed her eyes, bracing for the end, but instead of feeling its teeth, she heard the sound of it biting into the chair. Surprised, she moved slightly to the side and realized that the creature seemed to be sniffing around her. It dawned on her that the demon couldn't see. It was hunting by scent. The problem was that she was too close. Any noise could trigger an attack. She needed to retrieve the Nerf gun. It was her only shot at survival. Slowly, she stretched out her hand, reaching for the gun on the table. But as she turned her head slightly, the demon seemed to sense her movement, snapping its jaws in her direction. She remembered Su-Chen's warning. He wouldn't keep her around just because she was pretty. Inside every monster's head was a crystal, and Su-Chen had no patience for useless people. With that thought, a surge of determination coursed through her. She wasn't useless. With a fierce resolve, Duan Ya stomped down hard on the monster's eye with her heel. Her foot got stuck in the creature's eye socket, and she struggled to keep it from moving closer. But as soon as she freed her foot, the creature clamped down on her ankle. Gritting her teeth in anger, she stomped on its other eye with her other foot, driving her heel in deep. The demon crumpled to the ground, momentarily defeated. Seizing the opportunity, she grabbed an axe lying nearby. "I'm not useless," she declared, her voice filled with defiance. She raised the axe high, determined to carve out the crystal from the monster's head. She would prove to Su-Chen that she was strong, that she was more than capable of surviving in this world. Meanwhile, in the girls' dormitory, Bong and Xiaofang began evacuating everyone, following Su Chen's advice. The Golden King Cobra had entered its mutation phase, and Su Chen was face to face with the creature, patiently waiting for the transformation to begin. He knew that the snake needed water to evolve, so he had brought a bucket. As soon as he set it on the ground, the snake moved toward it, revealing a surprising level of intelligence. The moment the snake touched the water, the transformation began. It started to convulse, and the bucket swelled with its expanding form until it suddenly exploded. The creature had grown enormous, now towering over Su Chen. He quickly realized that the snake had become significantly stronger with just that small amount of water. If he had allowed a flood, the situation would have been much more dangerous. Drawing his blade, Su Chen warned the snake that if it submitted, he might consider making it a pet. But instead of complying, the snake darted toward the window, revealing a cunning intelligence beyond what he had expected. Realizing the snake was trying to escape, Su Chen leapt out of the window after it. Mid-air, he aimed to stab the snake's head with his sword, but the blade shattered against its toughened scales. The creature's hide was far more resistant than he had anticipated. The snake lunged at him, fangs bared, but he calmly leapt toward it, declaring that if a blade couldn't penetrate, he would use his fists. With that, Su Chen punched the snake's head, slamming it into the ground. However, the snake used his momentary distraction to its advantage, quickly wrapping its powerful body around him, attempting to immobilize him. "You're quite the cunning one," he remarked, realizing the snake had been baiting him all along. As it tightened its grip, preparing to crush him, Su Chen understood that every move she had made was part of a larger plan. The creature coiled tighter, preparing for a final strike to end him. Elsewhere, a soldier from the army tells the captain that she can't stop thinking about Su Chen because she keeps glancing in the direction he went. Frustrated, she tells him to shut up. The soldier warns that if Su Chen went off alone, he would likely die. However, Bong interrupts, saying it's impossible. She is certain that Su Chen is far stronger than he appears. "It's almost as if he were an untamed monster in this apocalypse," she adds. Back at the battle with the Golden King Cobra, a hand suddenly intercepts the snake's deadly strike. It's Su Chen. "Did you really think you could defeat me with that?" he taunts, his voice calm but commanding. He tells the creature that he's well aware of the regenerative capabilities of snakes, but what he's about to do is different. With a swift motion, he grabs the snake by the head, yanking it to the side, and with incredible strength, splits its massive body in two. As the snake's lifeless halves fall to the ground, Su Chen searches through the remains and finds the crystal he was looking for. Holding it up, he examines it closely. By its color, he knows this crystal will significantly boost his abilities and powers. Su Chen held the crystal up, examining its unique color and vibrant energy. A glint of curiosity sparkled in his eyes. "I wonder what kind of ability I'll gain from this." As the rising tide began to flood the city, people found themselves with nowhere to escape. Only the tallest buildings remained above the waterline, their rooftops crowded with desperate survivors. Meanwhile, Su Chen, who had just absorbed the water snake's core, was calmly diving beneath the surface. Scales had appeared on his body, granting him a sleek, streamlined form that allowed him to move effortlessly through the water. Underwater, Su Chen felt an unexpected surge of strength. Strangely, he realized that even without using his mouth or nose to breathe, he wasn't suffocating. It was as if his skin itself was absorbing oxygen from the water around him. Recognizing the value of this new ability, he thought to himself how useful it would be in this flooded world. Although it wasn't the water manipulation power he had initially hoped for, this newfound capacity to breathe underwater and his enhanced physical prowess would be incredibly advantageous. He observed his surroundings, noting that the water seemed to originate from the hotel area. For now, there was no way to swim against the strong current to return there. Looking toward the horizon, he saw dark clouds of ash looming, indicating that the volcanoes had reached their peak eruption. He knew that once the ash settled and the sky cleared, the Earth would likely enter a glacial period. At this rate, no one would survive without evolved abilities. As he weighed his options, memories of the numerous factions that had emerged when the floods began came rushing back to him. He recalled that the Northern Territory had been dominated not only by the snake he had just killed, but also by the notorious female corpse's king. He knew that this was just the beginning. The evolving world would demand both power and strategy to survive. And with his new abilities, Su Chen was more prepared than ever to face the challenges ahead. The southern part of the city was dominated by the cannibal clan, while the eastern part was under the control of the Rat King and his army. In the west, Gan Kang and the people of the Green Hotel held power. Su Chen remembered that, in his previous life, he had nearly met his end at the hands of each of these groups. But in this life, he had already dealt with Gan Kang and the Snake King. His goal now was to gather more cores to strengthen himself further and take down the remaining enemies. The problem, however, was that the Devar clan had a very large population, making them difficult to confront, and the Corpse Queen hid so well that finding her was nearly impossible. He recalled that the rat plague had originated at the university, meaning the Rat King must be there. Lost in thought, Su Chen suddenly realized he had relaxed too much and found himself surrounded by zombies in the water. Nearby, two men clung to the top of an antenna, struggling to climb higher as they wondered how the floodwaters had risen so quickly. The bald man looked back and shouted to his friend that someone was swimming toward them. The other man dismissed it as impossible until he saw for himself a figure moving through the water, neither drowning nor being swept away by the current. Knowing how unstable their perch was, the two men decided that if this swimmer got any closer, they would kick him back into the water. But the bald man warned his friend to be careful. A lot of things seemed to be following this swimmer. That's when they saw it, a legion of zombies trailing behind Su Chen. Realizing he was headed straight for them, they shouted that they were from the Evolution Federation and told him not to approach. This piqued Su Chen's interest. Without hesitation, he leaped out of the water and launched a powerful kick at the bald man, sending him tumbling into the floodwaters. As the man fell, his friend managed to grab his arm and yelled for him to hold on to the pillar. But the bald man, unable to reach it, calmly told his friend to let go, knowing that if he didn't, they might both fall. In a surprising act of selflessness, he said it was better for one of them to survive. Meanwhile, Su Chen stood atop the antenna, demanding that they spill everything they knew about the Evolution Federation. The remaining man cursed him and refused to talk. With zombies closing in, Su Chen warned that if they chose not to cooperate, they couldn't blame him for what happened next. Almost immediately, one of the zombies grabbed the bald man's leg, pulling him down into the water. Su Chen shrugged, stating he had given them a chance. It wasn't his fault. They didn't take it. The friend, driven by loyalty, jumped into the water to save the bald man. Below, the zombies began their attack, and the man was certain he was about to die. But then, out of nowhere, Su Chen appeared, cutting through the water with incredible speed. He swiftly dispatched the first zombie and unleashed a flurry of strikes, clearing the water of the undead threat in moments. The two men stared in disbelief, wondering if this kid was even human. A short while later, back on top of the antenna, they admitted they owed Su Chen their lives and agreed to tell him whatever he wanted to know. They revealed they had been sent there to investigate him. The Evolution Federation was currently located at the University of Science and Technology and was led by a man named Leo. Knowing this, University was where the rat plague had started. Su Chen asked if they were conducting any research involving rodents. The man responded that, unfortunately, they weren't. No one was allowed near the labs anymore. Now motivated to act quickly, Su Chen decided he needed to get to the university and deal with the situation before the rat disaster could unfold. Meanwhile, at the hotel, Duanya had managed to survive the chaos and had even obtained a core from one of the zombies. Despite her meticulous nature and the care with which she approached her tasks, she found it odd that even the upper floors of the hotel were now flooded. Something caught Duanya's attention as a sea creature slithered its way toward her, coiling its slippery body around her, trying to crush her. The creature was undeniably cruel and wicked, with a mouth full of razor-sharp teeth that lunged at her. Duanya barely managed to grab it, but her hand got entangled in its slimy appendages, leaving her immobilized. Panic set in as she saw more of these creatures swimming toward her. She realized she didn't have time to figure out how to use the new ability she had gained from the zombie core. She remembered what Su Chen had once told her. You couldn't know what ability you had received just by looking at the creature's appearance. She recalled a conversation with the healthy doctor, who had asked how one could figure it out if they couldn't tell by the creature's looks. Su Chen had explained that the only way was to focus on the subtle changes within your body and attempt to harness that power. Determined, she focused inwardly, trying to detect any new sensations or abilities. Suddenly, she felt a strange awareness, a new sense. She looked at the creatures and seemed to see a small brain in each of them, glowing with a red eye. A surge of confidence washed over her as she let out a commanding scream. "Stop!" The creatures froze, their instinctive aggression giving way to fear. They slowly backed away from her, terrified. Though she was frustrated by the sticky substance covering her, Duanya quickly grabbed an axe. "Now I'll slice you like tofu," she muttered with a fierce grin. With renewed strength and determination, she swung the axe at the creature's membranes, tearing through them effortlessly, cutting down every one of the monsters around her. Her movements were precise and powerful, each swing of the axe obliterating the enemies, demonstrating her newfound strength and resolve. While Duanya talked about needing a bath, she suddenly heard a voice behind her, asking if they could join. She spun around angrily, ready to attack, but then recognized Su-chen, who was wearing an oxygen suit. Realizing it was him, she leaped onto him, joyfully celebrating his return. However, seeing his oxygen suit, she quickly stepped back and apologized for getting too close. After some time, they decided to take a bath to clean up after the intense fighting. As they washed away the grime, Su-chen asked if she had truly received a new ability. Duanya seemed pleased that he had noticed, as it meant she was no longer considered useless. Su-chen, always pragmatic, asked if her ability could be used in practical ways, like changing the appearance of food, for example. She replied that she would need to practice first to understand its full potential. Curious about what this practice entailed, Su-chen felt his mind being taken over. Suddenly, he saw Duanya in a combat outfit, designed for extreme protection. Recognizing this as a manifestation of her ability, he quickly activated his own power to break free from her mental control. "You'll need to practice this ability a lot," he stated firmly, understanding that mental control required precision and strength. A gunshot rang out, and two nearby creatures fell. It was Su-chen, demonstrating to Duanya the importance of mental discipline. "You must control your mind and maintain a steady aim," he instructed. He then informed her that he would give her half a day to get accustomed to her new power, knowing that mastering it could be crucial for their survival in the dangerous world they were navigating. Su-chen asked Duanya if she was from the medical university, and when she confirmed, he informed her that she would be joining him on the next mission. It was time for her to show some usefulness. While sailing through the flooded city on the boat, Duanya looked down at her extreme protection armor and asked Su-chen, "Is it okay to wear clothes like this?" She seemed unsure, perhaps feeling awkward. Su-chen glanced at her and replied, "It's fine. Even if you don't wear anything, I'm here to protect you." His words were both reassuring and slightly teasing, meant to make her feel more at ease. Curious about their destination, she inquired why he wanted to go to the science university. Su-chen simply replied, "I want to see a friend. I'm wondering if he survived." She tried to comfort him, saying, "Don't worry. Good people have good luck." A while later, they approached their destination. Duanya notified Su-chen that they had arrived, pointing out a heavily barricaded area. "That's the science university," she said. As they drew closer, Su-chen's sharp eyes noticed some movement on the wall. Suddenly, a shot rang out, narrowly missing them. Su-chen quickly moved to shield Duanya. From the top of the wall, a man shouted, "What are you doing here?" Su-chen remembered thus is the Science and Technology University where the rat mutant ring rose last time. Su-chen called up to the guards on the wall, "I want to join the Evolution Federation. Open the gate!" The chubby guy on the wall eyed them suspiciously before responding, "The rabbit girl can come in, but the guy has to disappear." He clearly didn't trust Su-chen and seemed to think, "You might be more useful on her own." Duanya, however, had a different plan. She quickly held up a plate of smoked pork, a rare delicacy in the apocalypse. "How about you let us both in for this?" she suggested with a confident smile. The chubby guy's eyes widened in disbelief, and he went wild with excitement. "Impossible! How could such a thing exist in this world?" he exclaimed, clearly desperate for a taste. "Open the gate now," he ordered his men. It had been so long since they had seen any real meat. The gates creaked open, and Su-chen and Duanya sailed their boat into the compound. As they reached the dock, several men rushed over, eyes locked on the plate of smoked pork. They began arguing among themselves, demanding the meat immediately. Tensions ran high as each of them jockeyed for position, eager to claim the first bite. Amidst the commotion, Duanya's eyes glowed red, a sign that she was using her newfound ability. She cast a glance at the chubby guy who was already devouring what he thought was a piece of roasted pork. But under her mental influence, he didn't realize that he was actually chewing on a zombie's arm. His face twisted with delight as he savored what he believed to be a rare treat, completely unaware of the horrifying truth. They were led through the base, with their guide explaining how things worked. "Everyone here helps each other," he said. "The first floor is for the children, the elderly, and those who can't contribute much. But you all are headed up to where the more useful folks stay. As they walked, a small child suddenly bumped into one of them and fell to the ground. The guide harshly scolded her, asking if she didn't know how to walk. The little girl, looking frightened, apologized quietly. Duan, feeling sympathy, bent down and picked her up. She looks starving, she noted softly, pulling out a piece of bread to offer the girl. Even though she was clearly hungry, the child hesitated. If I take this, will my bunny sister go hungry? She asked, her voice full of worry. Duan was confused by the mention of a bunny sister, but Su-chen stepped in, calmly telling the child she won't go hungry. The girl looked at him doubtfully. Stop lying. Everyone is hungry these days. Su-chen's expression hardened. He could tolerate doubts about his character, but questioning his strength was a different matter. Without another word, he pulled out an entire feast in front of everyone and told the girl to eat. The people around them were stunned, unable to comprehend where the food had come from. Duan Ya gently put the bread in the girl's mouth, but before they could fully process the situation, a group of rough-looking men approached. These were the ones who controlled the place, and they didn't waste any time asserting their dominance. They kicked people around, reminding everyone that food had to be exchanged for contribution points. One of the men noticed the child eating and scowled. Breaking the rules, huh? The little girl clung to Duan Ya, who calmly reassured her. Su-chen, meanwhile, gave Duan Ya a subtle signal, and she quickly caught on. The men's attention shifted to her as she extended her arm, using her power to produce a large spread of food. I prepared this for you, she said, presenting the feast to them. The men were immediately drawn in by the smell and sight of the food. Without hesitation, they started diving into the meal, praising its taste. This is so good. It makes me want to cry. One of the men, now satisfied with the food, turned to Duan Ya with a smirk. You're kind, so we won't punish you, he said. But your friend here, he nodded toward Su-chen, won't be so lucky. Su-chen, unfazed, asked calmly, How do you plan to punish me? The man called out, and two chain-bound zombies shuffled into view, their dead eyes and grotesque figures sparking recognition in Su-chen. These were the same people he had saved at the post. Confusion and a sense of dread washed over him as he wondered what had happened to them. The little girl beside Duan Ya also recognized the zombies and gasped, What happened to my brothers? Tears welled up in her eyes as she ordered them to be released. Why are you doing this to people? She cried. The men, still chewing on the food, shrugged. It's their fault for not completing the mission they were given. Now they're just here for some fun. One of the men leaned in closer, his eyes gleaming with malicious intent. But now that everyone knows each other, he said with a sinister grin, things have gotten even more interesting. He threatened Su-chan, saying, If you lose, I'll toss these 3 siblings into the water to feed the water monsters. Meanwhile, Su-chen thought to himself that the 2 brothers seemed to be in some sort of frenzied state. Were they injected with drugs? He wondered. A loud voice boomed from the side. Begin! It was the man with the eye patch, still holding the drumstick in his hand. He released the chains, unleashing the beasts on Su-chen. Both mutated demons charged at him, their rage evident on their faces, veins bulging on their heads and mouths wide open, ready to attack. In this horrifying moment, Su-chen remained steady and calm. As soon as the demons reached him, he swiftly delivered a karate chop to the first one's neck, dropping it instantly. The second demon got a powerful slap across the face, causing blood to splatter from its mouth. With just one hit, Su-chen knocked out both demons. Zami, on the other hand, burst into tears, believing her brothers had been killed by Su-chen. Duan Ya held Zami close, comforting her and gently reassuring, Don't worry, they'll be fine. They're not dead. The eye-patched man was not pleased with how things had turned out. He yelled, How is the fight already over? Damn it, I wasted 2 doses of my medicine. Then, with a dismissive wave, he added, Forget it. They were just 2 useless trash anyway. With a creepy smile, he turned to Su-chen and said, I'm in a good mood today. If you hand over all your supplies, I'll pretend this never happened. Su-chen shifted his gaze at the eye-patched man and asked, But why should I hand over my supplies to you? A man from the eye-patched man's team spoke up angrily. You're new here, aren't you? Anyone entering Science and Technology University must follow Boss Liu's rules to keep things in order and weed out freeloaders. The eye-patched man added, We don't support freeloaders here. If you want to stay, you need to earn contribution points. You can earn them by handing over resources or finding supplies. A voice emerged from behind the enemies, causing them to turn in fear. It was Boss Guo. The sight of him sent a chill down their spines, and their voices began to tremble in his presence. Boss Guo radiated an immense amount of energy, with his aura turning the atmosphere red and his eyes sparkling with a fierce red light. He looked at Su Chen and said, "If you want contribution points, why not work for me?" Duan Ya, standing behind Su Chen, was shocked as she saw a massive figure approaching them while sitting on a throne carried by his slaves. One of the female slaves was tied in ropes beside him on the throne. Boss Guo, a fearsome, monster-like figure, loomed over them. The slaves trembled under the weight they were carrying, and when one of them tripped and fell, Boss Guo reacted instantly. Without hesitation, he threw his spear at the fallen slave. The spear pierced through the man's chest, and with a scream, he lay lifeless on the ground. Su Chen and Duan Ya were shocked by the inhumane scene unfolding before them. Boss Guo, with a calm smile on his face, remarked, "As you can see, we're short on people. You're just in time to replace him, especially that bunny girl over there," referring to Duan Ya. He continued, "I'll give you a can of meat and unlimited instant noodles every day. How about it?" He grabbed the female slave by the head, grinning as he looked at her. She screamed, clearly in pain from his strong grip. Boss Guo added, "It's the apocalypse now. Industrial production has ceased. I'm making a big sacrifice for you. Who knew I'd be so bored with these guys already?" The eye-patched guy, standing beside his two muscle-bound henchmen, added to what Boss Guo had said, "Our boss is offering you a generous deal. I advise you to accept it." One of the muscle boys standing by mumbled, "Great. If the boss gets a new woman, he'll let us have fun with the previous one." However, Boss Guo's mood shifted abruptly as he detected the unpleasant smell emanating from their mouths. With a sharp tone, he inquired, "What have you guys been eating?" The boys, sweating and paralyzed with fear, had no answer. Eating meat without Boss Guo's permission was a serious crime, punishable by death. Realizing that their lies wouldn't work, they dropped to their knees, begging, "We won't do it again. Please give us another chance. In the future, we'll give any food to you first." Boss Guo cut them off, shouting, "Shut up! The smell is killing me! Did you eat shit? Stop talking and get away from Mel!" Meanwhile, Su Chen, standing with Duan Ya, noticed that he could see through Duan Ya's mental control. It seemed like it didn't affect him at all. All the henchmen stood there, dumbfounded and bewildered, confusion written across their faces. They were sweating and trembling, trying to muster up the courage to speak. But before they could utter a word, a sudden excruciating pain gripped their stomachs. Blood began gushing from their mouths, leaving them clueless about the cause of this sudden agony. Desperate and panicked, they had no choice but to flee, running off to heed the urgent calls of nature. Seeing the pitiful state of his subordinates, Boss Guo felt no pride in their performance. Instead, he grew increasingly frustrated and disappointed, his thoughts shifting to replacing them with more capable individuals. It was clear to him that new blood was needed to maintain control and uphold his standards. Meanwhile, Su Chen was intrigued. Despite not sensing any special abilities from Boss Guo, the man exuded a powerful aura that couldn't be ignored. It puzzled Su Chen. How could someone without any discernible abilities still command such an overwhelming presence? Moreover, under Boss Guo's influence, everyone snapped out of Duan Ya's mind control. This left Su Chen even more curious. What kind of person is Liu? He wondered. Judging by the behavior and caliber of his subordinates, Liu couldn't be anything good. The thought lingered in Su Chen's mind as he tried to piece together what kind of leader could command such a ruthless and chaotic group. As Su Chen pondered the idea of killing them all and continuing his search for the rat mutant, a voice interrupted his thoughts. It was Boss Guo asking, "So, what do you think about my offer?" Guo's question pulled Su Chen back to the present, forcing him to focus on the decision at hand. Su Chen declined the offer, leaving Boss Guo visibly disappointed. Guo knew that having someone like Su Chen on his side would be incredibly valuable. Instead of pushing for a confrontation, he simply said, "One day, you'll come begging to me." With that, Guo called one of his men over and instructed him to take the front positions. Without another word, he turned and left, leaving Su Chen and the others behind. Duan Ya felt a deep sense of guilt in that moment. She apologized to Su Chen, admitting, "His strength was too strong and my ability was useless against him." Su Chen responded calmly, laying out the facts. "It's not your fault. If these guys didn't die after eating the water ghouls' corpses, then something's definitely not right. We need to be careful." His tone was firm but reassuring, emphasizing the need for caution moving forward. A man approached Su-chan from behind, saying, "You've angered the guards. They won't let you go. Su-chan, you have to come with me now." Surprised that this person knew his name, Su-chan asked, "Why are you helping us?" His curiosity was piqued as he tried to gauge the man's intentions. The man pointed a finger at himself and said, "It's me, M. Puan. I'm Tianyu's roommate. We met when you last visited the school, remember?" Guo's sinister grin widened as he said, "In the apocalypse, women as hot as her are very rare." His words carried a chilling tone, reflecting his twisted desires. Several hours later, Monsieur Puan led Su Chen and Duan Ya to another part of the university, heading toward the central building. The structure was connected by wooden bridges, creating a makeshift network over the flooded areas. In one of the rooms, there was a makeshift medical station with a drip, though their supplies of medicine were limited. Despite this, they had enough to treat some of the more urgent cases. They carefully laid the girl's brother on the floor atop a blanket and connected him to the drip. As the fluid began to flow, the man's eyes squeezed shut, his teeth clenched, and beads of sweat formed on his forehead. Duan Ya sat down on the floor next to him, her expression serious. She rested one hand on her knee and placed the other on the man's chest, trying to offer some comfort. She turned her head away slightly, focusing her gaze elsewhere to maintain her composure. With a steady voice, Duan Ya explained to the girl that her brother was no longer in mortal danger, at least for the moment. The girl, who was standing nearby, let out a sigh of relief. Overcome with gratitude, she smiled and thanked Duan Ya, saying, "You're the best." The room they were in was crowded with other people, some sitting, others trying to sleep. The atmosphere was tense but hopeful. Su Chen, with his hands casually tucked into his pants pockets, walked over to Monsieur Puan and asked, "Do all the students live here now?" Monsieur Puan, who was standing protectively next to Su Chan, nodded. "Yes," he replied. "Regardless of whether they are men or women, everyone who's still alive has taken refuge here now." She paused, her eyes drifting to Su Chen's calm expression. Then, with a serious tone, Monsieur Puan continued, "Because Brother Tian used to help everyone, this place is considered their territory from the field department." Su Chen's gaze remained steady and calm as he listened to him explanation. After a moment, he asked, "Which field department?" His curiosity was piqued, and he was keen to understand more about the social dynamics within this refuge. As they were talking, a man with a rifle on his shoulder appeared. "Our field department is strong. Even if we face tough opponents, we can handle them," he said with confidence. Su Chen looked at him, curious about who this man was. The man came closer. He had a rifle, several knives on his back, a diving mask, and sturdy armor. He looked ready for anything. "Are you interested in joining us?" he asked Su Chen. Before Su Chen could answer, Monsieur Puan recognized him. "Tian-Wu!" Monsieur Puan shouted, looking excited. "Guess who I've brought back?" he said, glancing at Su Chen. Su Chen looked at Tian-Wu, surprised. For a moment, he couldn't believe it was really him. Tian-Wu, filled with emotion, quickly hugged Su Chen. "I thought you were dead," he said, relieved. "But you're still alive." Seeing each other again, Tian-Yu decided they should have some drinks since he had just returned to the field department and had a few days to spend with them. As sweat dripped down his forehead, he turned his head and, with a surprised look, wondered what was happening. Behind them was Duan Ya. Upon seeing her, Tian-Yu was stunned and started sweating even more. He knew her. She was famous at their University of Science and Technology, known as the Cold Goddess Duan. As she walked toward them, she put her hands behind her back, struck a seductive pose, and said those were things of the past, irrelevant to the present. Tian-Yu panicked, his mouth open in shock. He pointed at her and, with a confused look, asked Monsieur Puan how the legendary goddess could be standing in front of them, dressed as a bunny. Monsieur Puan, covering his ears with his fingers and sweating, stared at her, unsure how to respond. Tian-Yu asked Monsieur Puan if she was really Duan Ya from the Faculty of Medicine, noting that it wasn't surprising she was so beautiful. Duan Ya then approached Su Chan, placed her hand on his chest, and looked into his eyes with a loving gaze. She blushed and told him that she wanted to change her clothes, as dressing like this in front of the students was too embarrassing. Su Chan, smiling, put his hand on her waist and agreed it was time for her to change. Puan clenched his fists in anger, jealous and frustrated as he watched the goddess Duan Ya with Su Chan. Tian-Wu, shocked, even started bleeding from his nose out of sheer disbelief and fury. Tian-Yu led them to another room, dropped his backpack on the floor, and apologized for the mess. He told them they could sit anywhere, and that Duanya could change her clothes in that room. As Duanya entered the room and thanked him, Suchan noticed how luxurious it was and couldn't help but be a bit surprised. Monsieur Puan turned his back, feeling envious of how Tianyu had used his contribution points. Tianyu, leaning against the wall and touching his mask, remembered that they hadn't brought any luggage and wondered where Duanya would get clothes to change into. Suchan shifted the conversation and asked if their missions were usually dangerous. Tianyu, tapping his mask, replied that every mission was dangerous. He noted that Suchan and Duanya looked clean, indicating they hadn't faced the harsh trials of the apocalypse. He asked them to stay put and suggested they join his team so he could protect them. Tianyu then reminded Suchan not to show off too much in the future, questioning why he let Duanya dress like a sexy bunny. He couldn't understand what Suchan was thinking and reminded him they were in the apocalypse. Suchan, turning back slightly with a calm look, assured him not to worry, saying he would take good care of her. Tianyu approached Suchan, gave him a playful punch on the head, and told him to keep his word. He reminded Suchan if he had forgotten who had been bullied back in high school and hadn't dared to stand up for himself. Tianyu was the one who had helped chase those bullies away. As Duanya entered the room and began to change out of her clothes, Tianyu warned Suchan that Captain Gu was not a good person. He mentioned that the women Captain Gu liked never had a good ending, especially beautiful women like Duanya. According to Tianyu, Captain Gu wasn't going to give up easily. While Duanya was undressing from her bunny costume, someone sneaked up behind her. The person pulled out a knife, placed it near her neck, and ordered her not to move. It was number Duanya, terrified, asked who she was and what she wanted. Num leaned closer, stuck out her tongue, and revealed that Captain Gu had sent her to help organize Duanya's accommodations. Num explained that Duanya, being a beautiful girl, naturally couldn't stay with the others. Feeling nervous, Duanya tried to stay calm and assured Num there was plenty of space, so there was no need for her to worry. But Num disagreed and insisted that the captain specifically wanted Duanya elsewhere. Duanya's eyes began to glow as she activated her power, telling Num once again that she wasn't leaving. In response, Num's eyes also started to glow, and she began sweating, struggling to resist Duanya's power. Duanya commanded Num to drop the knife. Overwhelmed, Num stepped back, confused, and released her grip on the weapon. As she stood still and looked at the ground, Duanya realized she could only control her for a short time. Taking advantage of this moment, Duanya moved toward the door to find Suchan and let him handle the rest. At that moment, Nam began to regain control of her movements. She gripped the knife tightly, and instead of attacking Duanya, she stabbed the knife into her own hand. The intense pain caused her to clench her teeth and scream, but it also helped her break free from Duanya's mind control. Duanya looked back, shocked, unable to believe that Nam would injure herself to wake up from the control. With a murderous look, Nam advanced towards Duanya, preparing to finish her off. She pushed Duanya against the wall with her elbow, holding the knife ready to strike. She glared into Duanya's eyes, furious that she had almost fallen into her trap and thought Duanya was a strange and dangerous girl. Duanya began to sweat, terrified, realizing the situation was getting worse. At that moment, someone started knocking on the door, asking what was happening and why there was so much noise. Seeing this, Nam quickly covered Duanya's mouth to keep her from responding. She glanced at the door with a serious expression, knowing this could be trouble. When no one responded, the person outside decided to force their way in. Seconds later, Suchan burst through the door. Nam immediately let go of Duanya and turned to face him. She asked if he was looking for trouble and then gathered herself to attack. Suchan stood still, not moving a muscle. Just then, Tianyu appeared and shouted for Suchan to be careful. Hearing Suchan's name, Nam's expression changed drastically. She was shocked and began to sweat, unable to comprehend what was happening. As she got closer, she realized that the person who knocked down the door was indeed Suchan. Her eyes widened in terror, and she remembered the horrifying events at the engineering university. She recalled how the monster, Suchan, had massacred everyone with his sharp claws, grabbing their leader by the neck and smiling sinisterly. Nam quickly realized the man in front of her was not just any enemy. He was a demon in human form. She stood frozen, overwhelmed by fear, unsure of what would happen next. Suchan took an offensive stance and stared at Nam with a piercing gaze, ready to attack. Despite her own history of killing, she felt an intense intuition that attacking Suchan would mean her own death. Trembling with terror, she sought a way to prevent this. Instead of attacking, Nam threw herself to the ground, placing both hands on it and bowing her head. She prostrated herself before Suchan, showing him a sign of submission. This unexpected gesture left everyone in shock. Suchan remained still, staring at the ground in silence. Duanya, confused and surprised, watched the scene unfold, unable to understand why Nam was behaving this way. Nam, with her hands and legs on the ground, crawled toward Suchan. She looked up at him with a mixture of fear and submission, calling him master and pleading for him to punish her. Tianyu, sweating and confused, turned his head back, puzzled by why Nam was calling Suchan master. With both hands in his pockets, Suchan's body started to emit a powerful pink energy. He looked at Nam with a serious expression and asked, "Who is your master?" Nam called Suchan master, and with a sincere look, asked if he didn't trust her. Without hesitating, she took off her clothes, holding them in her hand, and smiled, asking what he thought of her now. Completely undressed, Tianyu couldn't help but stare, his mouth agape, blushing as he pointed at her, confused. "Why did you undress completely?" he asked, baffled, wondering if Suchan had such strong tastes. Nguyen, standing behind Tianyu, was also taken aback, his mouth open in shock, blushing at the sight. Nam stared at Suchan in silence, her mind working on another plan. While everyone was distracted by her actions, she pulled out a smoke bomb and threw it on the ground, creating a thick curtain of smoke. Realizing her intention to escape, Tianyu and the others quickly reacted, but the smoke screen grew thicker. Nam took this chance and dashed toward the exit, but just as she thought she could escape, a hand suddenly appeared and grabbed her, stopping her in her tracks. She panicked, realizing her plan was failing, and clenched her teeth, a look of terror on her face. Nam looked at the hand gripping her neck and began to sweat, unable to believe what was happening. The one who had caught her was Suchan. With one hand in his pants pocket, he used the other to strangle Nam. His expression was cold as he asked if she thought she could escape so easily. Panic filled her eyes, and she quickly pleaded dead, begging him not to kill her. She reminded them of the girl they had rescued a few days ago, revealing that the girl and her two brothers had been taken to the Colosseum. If Suchan killed her, they would never find out what was really happening. Suchan hesitated for a moment, then stopped strangling Nam. He stared into her eyes and calmly told her he didn't care about any of it. Without another word, he used all his strength to throw her out of the building. The glass shattered, and Nam's body plunged into the floodwaters below, waters that were teeming with monsters. Tianyu turned to Monsieur Puan, sweat forming on his brow. "Who is the girl she mentioned?" he asked. Monsieur Puan, now visibly shaken, explained that the girl's name was Son Sami, and she had two older brothers. He was certain that Captain Gu's men had taken them away. Suchan looked at them calmly, thinking. Tianyu clenched his teeth and realized that this situation was becoming dangerous. Monsieur Puan approached Suchan and asked with urgency, "What are we going to do now? If we don't rescue them soon, the mutant rats could kill them." As Suchan's body began to emit a powerful energy, he looked at them with a calm gaze. Even though he knew this university was the origin of the mutant rats, he asked which rats they were talking about. Turning his back to the group, he began to walk away, intent on investigating further. Duanya appeared beside him, still dressed in her rabbit costume, ready to follow him wherever he went. Duanya began following Suchan closely, not wanting to be left behind, for fear that Captain Gu's men might come back for her. Suchan was planning to head to the Colosseum. Meanwhile, not far from their location, a laboratory stood. Next to it was a large metal cage, inside which was a platform where the girl's two brothers were tied up. The girl stood near the platform, and in front of her sat Captain Gu, surrounded by several of his men. As he looked at the girl, he laughed and taunted her, saying that if she was willing to enter the arena, he might consider releasing her brothers. The girl's two brothers were suspended from ropes, their arms bound tightly. One of the brothers, a man in gray, gritted his teeth and warned his sister not to trust Captain Gu, urging her to flee. Captain Gu turned to the man with a smirk and told him it was too late for any of them to escape now. The girl stood defiantly in front of the platform, holding a wooden stick with both hands. With a determined look, she declared she wasn't going to run away and asked Captain Gu if he truly intended to release her brothers. Captain Gu, pointing at her with a finger, smiled and told her that if she managed to survive, he would set them free. At that moment, the cage behind her opened, and a giant mutant rat emerged, advancing toward her. The sound of the cage opening made the girl sweat with fear. She slowly turned her head back to see what was behind her. As she turned, she saw the massive rat, its mouth filled with sharp teeth, ready to attack. Before she could react, the mutant rat lunged forward and sank its teeth into her arm. She clutched the wooden stick with her free hand, screamed in agony, and shut her eyes tight. The rat bit down harder and violently shook her body from side to side, causing excruciating pain. As she was attacked, memories of her brothers flooded her mind. She remembered the time her brother had found many mushrooms. Sitting on the ground next to her, he proudly showed off the mushrooms he'd gathered. She had questioned whether they were poisonous, and her bald brother, who sat beside them, took it upon himself to test them. He ate a few mushrooms, deciding that if he didn't die, they would be safe for Zami to eat. The girl and her other brother watched in shock, mouths agape, wondering if he had lost his mind. It didn't take long for the mushrooms to take effect. The bald man's arms fell limp, his mouth opened, and foam began to pour out. Delirious, he muttered about seeing red umbrellas in the sky. Her other brother, realizing the mushrooms were poisonous, urged him to spit them out immediately. Days later, when her brothers were preparing to leave for a mission, they reassured her. One of them, with a cheerful look, promised that once they completed their task, they would earn contribution points and buy food so she wouldn't go hungry anymore. The other brother, smiling, assured her they would all have a delicious meal together when they returned. Back in the present, the sight of the mutant rat mauling their sister filled her brothers with panic. Tears streamed down their faces as one brother, terrified, shouted for her to run and not to worry about them. The other, drenched in sweat, pleaded for her to flee, reminding her that she still had a long life ahead of her. Xiao Mei gained courage from her memories of her brother and told her brother, "Hang in here! I will save you!" At that moment, she hit the rat in the eye with the stick she was holding, and the big rat fell to the ground, making Xiao Mei cry as she looked at her brothers. The rat came from behind her, placed its paw on her waist, and she collided with the ground. It seems like the little kid was trying to save her Captain Gao, who muttered and laughed, saying trash like should not be alive. "Why is this happening? We just wanted to live. Why?" one of the brothers asked. Xiao Mei, while crying, asked, "Who will save us now?" And at that moment, Su Chan appeared and killed the big rat in no time. It must have been a relief for them to have someone come to their rescue like that. Tian Yu shouted, "This kid is too impulsive." It sounds like Tian Yu was a bit surprised by the kid's actions in the scenario. Sometimes impulsive decisions can lead to unexpected outcomes. Su Chan brought his hand up to his face, gazing at it with a contemplative look. He assessed the remains of the mutant rat he had just defeated, and concluded that it was nothing special, just large, without a core, and seemingly different from the usual mutants. He pondered for a moment, considering why it felt unlike the other common mutants. Captain Gu, observing Su Chan, sneered and called him a bastard. With a wicked smile, he gave his men the order to open another cage. Following his command, the men quickly opened the cage, releasing several giant mutant rats. He said to Su Chan with a grin on his face, "You want to die, fulfill your wish." Su Chan, unbothered, simply placed both hands in his pockets, looked down at the ground, and stood still. While Su Chan was surrounded by the mutant rats in the arena, Tianu and Monsieur Puan seized the opportunity to rescue the girl's brothers. Monsieur Puan, who was behind them, lifted one brother onto his shoulder, supporting the injured boy with a firm grip across his chest. The brother gritted his teeth and closed one eye in pain. Monsieur Puan turned his head, noticing his expression, and couldn't help but wonder what had happened to him. Tian Yu, who was in front, placed the bald brother's arm over his shoulder. As he walked, he glanced at the wounded brother and suggested they rest for a while. With a comforting smile, he called out to their little sister. Hearing his voice, the girl turned around and, upon seeing her brothers alive, she started sweating from relief. "Are you okay?" she asked, her voice trembling with concern. Duanya, standing beside her, looked at her brothers. Seeing their weakened state, she felt a pang of sadness. The girl's brothers forced a smile to reassure her, not wanting her to worry. The bald man, grateful, thanked her sincerely. "If it hadn't been for you, we would have lost our lives," he admitted. The girl then approached Duanya, giving him a heartfelt hug. With a sincere look, she revealed, "It wasn't me. It was Suchan who saved us." Duanya looked down at her, surprised but remaining silent, taking in her words. Meanwhile, outside the arena, a figure emerged from the water, dripping wet and leaving a trail of water behind. It was Nam, who had somehow survived and returned. She soon put on her clothes and entered a nearby laboratory. Inside, a man with blue hair and glasses sat, enjoying a glass of wine. He was her boss. The blue-haired man looked at a screen with a calm gaze and asked, Is this Suchan, the special research material you mentioned? Na, crossing her arms and looking down, standing behind her boss, confirmed with a simple, yes. She added that by using Suchan's genes, they could investigate the problem of genetic instability in the apocalypse. Back in the arena, the mutant rats, released from their cage, were closing in on Suchan. The air was thick with tension as the rats, larger and more vicious than before, prepared to attack. Suchan, still with his hands in his pockets, continued to stare at the ground, his expression unchanged. Na's boss, observing the scene on the screen, explained to her that these mutant rats had been created using the latest technology. They are bigger and fiercer than any we've produced before. If this guy dies here, then he doesn't deserve to be my special experimental subject. However, as he continued to watch the screen, something caught his eye. The boss's calm demeanor shifted to one of surprise. He couldn't help but be somewhat astonished, beginning to wonder, what is this power? As the three mutant rats emerged from their cage, preparing to attack, Suchan reacted swiftly. In a blur of motion, he drew his dagger and charged, slicing through the rats with precision. Within seconds, their bodies were cut into pieces, and their agonized screams filled the air. The bald man, witnessing Suchan's prowess, was left in shock, unable to believe how quickly the rats had been dispatched. Tianyu, standing beside him, was equally stunned, unable to reconcile this display of power with the Suchan he knew. Captain Gu, initially disdainful, was now taken aback. He hadn't anticipated Suchan's ability to handle the mutant rats with such ease. After the battle, Suchan calmly cleaned his shirt and inspected the rats' corpses, noting their lack of core crystals, which further distinguished them from typical mutants. Suddenly, a loudspeaker crackled to life. Nam's boss, having activated the system, addressed the arena with a calm but commanding voice. He announced that Suchan was the very test subject he had been seeking and ordered Captain Gu and Tianyu to capture him and bring him to the laboratory. Captain Gu, realizing Tianyu is also a member of Field Department and his allegiance to Suchan, he was pleased with the unfolding drama, finding the situation both intriguing and amusing. With a terrified expression, Monsieur Puan urged, "Duanya, we need to leave before things get worse. If you don't go now, you might not be able to escape." Duanya, concerned for Suchan, replied firmly, "I won't leave. As long as Suchan is here, I'm not going anywhere." Tianyu, in a state of panic, the boss's order meant that Suchan would be taken for experimentation, either dead or alive. The thickening mist in the arena added to the growing tension. Tianyu, with a worried expression, felt trapped between his loyalty to Suchan and the dire circumstances. Tianyu, overwhelmed and with a lost gaze, was caught between his duty and his brother's safety. Suchan, observing Tianyu's distress, inquired about the situation. Tianyu, with a somber look, explained that their boss, Leon, had developed a potion early in the apocalypse to enhance people's strength. This potion, however, drained their life force over time. Tianyu expressed his regret, apologizing for the predicament they were in. Captain Gu, finding the situation entertaining, eagerly anticipated the confrontation. He prepared his mace, mocking Tianyu and declaring it was time to get serious. Just as he was about to attack Suchan, Tianyu intervened. He leaped into the arena, delivering a powerful kick to Captain Gu's face, sending him crashing to the ground. Captain Gu, stunned and enraged, struggled to get up, shouting about being challenged. Tianyu, with a fierce aura, confronted Captain Gu. He declared that the boss was merely a rat, using the potion to control others, and decided to fight, disregarding his own life. Suchan, confused by Tianyu's actions, watched in astonishment as Tianyu, once again, prepared for a battle. Duanya and Monsieur Puan were equally shocked by the turn of events. Suchan, with a cheerful look, thought about Tianyu's unwavering determination. Tianyu, facing Captain Gu, expressed that anyone who harmed his brothers would have to face him. The confrontation escalated. Captain Gu, wielding two maces, attempted to crush Tianyu. Despite the powerful strikes, Tianyu, though injured and bleeding, fought back fiercely. Gu, revealing that he had anticipated Tianyu's betrayal and had been using level 1 potions against him, pressed on with the attack. Tianyu, though gravely injured, continued to resist with unyielding determination. Captain Gu, with a malevolent grin, prepared to end the fight with an electric charge emanating from his mace. Just as the charge was about to reach Tianyu, Suchan intervened. He kicked the maces, causing Captain Gu to lose control, and mocked him, asking if he was truly invincible. Duanya, Monsieur Puan, and others watched in shock as Suchan managed to injure Captain Gu, a feat they hadn't thought possible. Leon, observing from the laboratory, was captivated by what Suchan has demonstrated. He was captivated by the extraordinary events. He marveled at Suchan's abilities, recognizing him as a key to perfecting humanity and offering him a place in his groundbreaking experiment. Leon's sinister plan involved using rat genes to create an army and conquer the post-apocalyptic world. As Suchan expressed his disdain for this plan, a startling sound interrupted the scene. An assassin emerged, aiming a gun. The bullet missed Suchan but struck the old man, who transformed into a grotesque creature, a sumo wrestler with enhanced strength and regenerative abilities. The once familiar Gu had now transformed into a terrifying monstrosity, with extra eyes grotesquely sprouting along his arms and razor-sharp teeth lining his distorted mouth. Leon, filled with arrogance, taunted, "Now you see the power of evolution. You're up against a level 3 evolved being. Know your place and serve me." Suchan, unfazed by Leon's bravado, responded with defiance. He raised his middle finger provocatively and retorted, "Turning people into monsters might seem impressive, but it's far from something to be proud of." With that, Leon gave the order, and the grotesque creature that Gu had become let out a terrifying roar before charging at Suchan. It morphed into a Sonic-like figure, rolling toward him with blinding speed, intending to crush him. The scene was so alarming that everyone around watched in horror, fearing for Suchan's life. Duanya, amidst the chaos, shouted, "Suchan, be careful!" Despite the looming danger, Suchan remained composed. As the electrified monster approached, he stood firm, calmly raising both hands as if to halt the creature. "Stop," he commanded with unexpected authority, and surprisingly, the monster hesitated. Suchan seized the moment to mock the situation further. "Do you really think that adding 2 batteries to a weapon will electrocute someone?" he sneered. To drive his point home, he forcefully shoved the power source into Gu's mouth. In his confused and enraged state, Gu misunderstood the gesture and bit down hard on the object. What followed was a catastrophic explosion. The power source detonated inside Gu's mouth, resulting in a deafening blast that echoed throughout the arena. The force of the explosion sent shockwaves through the air, and everyone watched in stunned silence as the nightmarish entity that was once Gu was engulfed in a blinding flash of light. The battle had taken an unexpected turn, leaving everyone in awe of Suchan's audacity and quick thinking. After defeating Gu, Suchan turned around with a confident smirk, only to be met with the anxious expressions of Tianyu and Duanya. "Did you actually defeat him?" they questioned, their voices filled with disbelief and concern. Leon, who had been observing the battle, was astonished by Suchan's unexpected use of explosive pins to deal damage. However, as he had previously warned, the Class B medicine Gu had taken granted him potent healing capabilities. To their horror, Gu's face began to rapidly heal, his human-like features shifting into a grotesque, monstrous form. As Gu continued to morph into something even more terrifying, undeterred, Suchan ascended into the air and launched a powerful punch at the monstrous Gu. Yet it quickly became clear that a single strike wouldn't be enough. Without missing a beat, Suchan unleashed a flurry of precise blows, moving with the skill and grace of a seasoned martial artist. As he fought, he reflected on how few people were aware of superpowers in this post-apocalyptic era, which fueled his determination to keep his abilities a secret. To maintain his cover, Suchan used his powers to obscure the battle from the onlookers, causing Duanya to fret as the dust clouded their view. "What's happening?" "I can't see a thing," she exclaimed in frustration, while Suchan marveled at his own clear line of sight, wondering if the others were experiencing the same clarity. Meanwhile, Leon, ever the schemer, questioned what Suchan had in store for the endgame. Suchan, aware of the creature's regenerative abilities, knew that as long as Gu continued to regenerate, Leon's twisted research would remain intact. A sinister chuckle escaped Suchan as he considered the unique attributes of his powers. Beyond his obvious combat abilities, Suchan had prepared a variety of other surprises. With a dramatic flourish, he unveiled his ultimate secret weapon, a massive heap of rocks, iron, and steel sourced from various construction sites, all destined to be crushed into a sticky mess. This was Suchan's ace in the hole, a strategy he had meticulously prepared to ensure that even the most powerful of foes would be brought down. As the battle raged on, Gu stood frozen, at first anticipating a feast, but instead faced with a disordered jumble of debris. Outside, the tumultuous sounds of battle echoed through the air, though the source remained elusive. Tianyu and Duanya exchanged bewildered glances, questioning where the noise originated. Meanwhile, Leon, drenched in sweat, muttered that Suchan must be conjuring some demonic trick. As the dust began to settle, a mountain of rubble appeared, and a lone figure emerged from it, leaving Tianyu and Duanya even more perplexed. They saw a towering mound crafted from various materials like iron and steel. Transforming the battlefield into a formidable fortress, Su Chen sat, calm and untouched, like an unstoppable ruler, while the failed efforts of his enemies lay buried under the rubble. Leon, now stripped of his usual bravado and gripped by fear, shouted desperately, "I don't care who you are or how you brought this debris here, but if you dare treat me like a dog, I'll make sure you die without a burial." He frantically pointed at the surrounding monstrous figures, sensing his doom. Su Chen, still calm, cracked his knuckles and replied, "I'm not planning to let this slide either." Duanya and Empuan realized they were surrounded by ratmen once lab subjects, now monstrous creatures. Suchan quickly informed them, "Leon is their primary target. We need to eliminate him to end this chaos." His voice was calm but urgent, emphasizing the importance of their next move. Suchan directed Duanya and Empuan to handle the mutated ratmen. As Duanya processed the command, she realized that failing to prove her worth could cost her everything. Determined, she and Empuan reassured Suchan, promising they would manage the situation with the mutated rats. Before leaving for the research lab, Suchan instructed them, "Call out loudly if you need any help." His parting words were firm, showing his trust in their abilities while remaining ready to assist if necessary. As soon as Suchan departed, Duanya, Empuan, and Tianyu rallied the team. Duanya informed them that she would focus on controlling the rats while they concentrated on eliminating them. Despite her determination, she faced a significant challenge. She had never controlled so many rats at once before. However, her resolve to stay close to Suchan motivated her to persevere. Meanwhile, Leon, observing the unfolding events from the research lab, watched with growing concern. He knew that if the situation escalated, the traitors would soon become food for the ratmen. Just then, a report came in. Suchan had incapacitated the building's security personnel. He was puzzled when he realized the girl he had freed was the same one he had met before the apocalypse at a bar. He never anticipated running into her again under these circumstances. Acting quickly, Suchan smashed the container to free Yun. As soon as she was out, she regained consciousness and was overjoyed to see him. He comforted her, promising to get her out of the situation. However, Yun mentioned she was hungry. Suchan reassured her, "Once we're safely away, I'll find you something to eat." Just then, a voice interrupted the moment, commanding Suchan to release Yun. An ice arrow flew toward him, but Suchan quickly intercepted it with his bare hand. Infuriated, Leon demanded, "Remove your filthy hands from her!" "She's the woman I've chosen." Suchan, taken aback by Leon's ice abilities, retorted, "Do you think you're just shopping for merchandise?" Leon sneered, replying, "In the apocalypse, ordinary people are nothing but ants. Someone with the power of evolution like myself is destined to rule the world. It's an honor for her to be with me." His arrogance was palpable, and his words dripped with a twisted sense of superiority. Suchan realized that Leon was indeed the lunatic the rumors had painted him to be. At that moment, Yun appeared, and Suchan embraced her tightly, reassuring her, "T'll never leave you again." As he comforted her, Leon's anger flared. Unable to contain his fury, he charged at Suchan, shouting, "Let go of her! She's my woman, you bastard!" Suchan tried to fend Leon off with a kick, but Leon dodged it effortlessly. Suddenly, Yun kissed Suchan passionately, surprising him as she whispered, "Who told you to leave me last time? This is what you owe me." After her words, she fell unconscious once more, leaving Suchan to face Leon's wrath. Suchan desperately attempted to revive Yun, but her weakened state prevented any response. Leon's rage intensified as he watched, unable to stand seeing someone else kiss the girl he claimed as his own. Boiling over with fury, he turned to Suchan with a fierce glare and demanded, "How dare you do this? If that's how it's going to be, then you can all go to hell together." With a surge of intense energy, Leon transformed into a grotesque mutated rat, fully embracing his monstrous form. He declared, "Now let me show you the power of a god." Suchan, seething with anger, responded with a single word, "Come." With swift, precise movements, Suchan destroyed the monster's upper body, sending the mutated rat's remains flying across the room. Blood and guts splattered everywhere, a fitting end for such a repulsive creature. As the blood sprayed around, Suchan expressed his disappointment, wondering if that was all the monster had to offer. The creature's pathetic look suggested it had underestimated him, not realizing how overpowering his strength and perhaps his fate truly was. Yun, still vigorously munching on the large piece of chocolate Suchan had given her, glanced at the people downstairs and asked, "Are they your friends?" Her expression was one of disappointment, as if the chocolate hadn't quite met her expectations. Suchan, looking down at her, confirmed, "Yes, they're my friends." Feeling a sense of duty to repay him, not just for saving her life, but for the unimpressive chocolate, Yun grabbed a chair and, with her striking physique, hurled it through the window. The glass shattered as she announced, "I'll handle the situation downstairs." Her volatile nature was now on full display. As Yun stood by the window, strong gusts of wind tugged at the remaining bandages, barely covering her important areas. She gave Suchan one last look and warned him, "Leon isn't so easy to kill. Be careful." Without another word, she leapt out of the window, plummeting swiftly due to the weight of her mountains. Though her bandages were bound to come loose, it seemed the artists spared the audience any explicit fan service. As she neared the ground, a horde of filthy rat monsters was rampaging through the area, signaling the intensity of the battle below. Despite the dangers, Yun dove straight into the fray, determined to assist Suchan's friends who were already caught in the thick of the conflict. As Yun descended through the sky, her size, and particularly the milk jugs, grew more imposing with each passing second. By the time she collided with the structure below, her presence had expanded to such an exaggerated scale that it seemed as though she could supply the planet with an endless stream of her liquids. The sheer force of her landing left a path of destruction, and Suchan's friends on the ground were left terrified, their hearts racing as thunderous crashes reverberated through the area. One of the onlookers, an attractive girl clad in a revealing bunny suit, her curves rivaling even Yun's, was clearly designed to captivate those in need of excitement. Next to her stood an unattractive, bumbling man, still processing the chaos that had just unfolded. Cold sweat dripped down his face as he struggled to comprehend the spectacle before him. Yun, wincing in pain from the harsh impact, caught their attention. The bunny girl, in disbelief, questioned whether she was hallucinating as she stared at the enormous mountains towering before her. Meanwhile, the man stood frozen, his eyes wide in astonishment, as ruined buildings and structures lay in disarray around them. The fallen members of the rat army littered the battlefield, a testament to the carnage Yun's landing had caused. Slowly recovering from her pain, Yun began to move through the battlefield, her colossal form casting a shadow over the bewildered onlookers. The bumbling man, terrified at the thought of being crushed, begged for mercy, his gaze fixated on her towering form and the precariously held bandages that barely contained her figure. His eyes lingered on their color, wishing he could vanish in the face of such overwhelming presence. As one of the filthy rats was crushed beneath Yun's foot, its rib cage splintered into dust, you might have wished it was you in that unfortunate creature's place. Oblivious to what she had stepped on, Yun curiously lifted her foot, inspecting the flattened mess without much realization. Meanwhile, the remaining rats stared at their crushed comrade, utterly terrified by the colossal figure they now regarded as the mother of milk. Before Yun could fully grasp what had just happened, a vicious swarm of rats began pouring out of the surrounding buildings, charging toward her with fury in their eyes, eager to avenge their fallen companion. But despite their frenzy, they were little more than foolish beasts. They raced across the field with blistering speed, spreading chaos. Civilians who were caught in their path desperately tried to escape, but only a few succeeded. Those who were unlucky enough to be in the rats' direct line of attack were swiftly skewered, transformed into grotesque shish kebabs in a matter of moments. The sight of the grotesque, foul-smelling creatures sent Yun into a full-blown panic. She screamed like a frightened child, her voice trembling with terror as the rats swarmed around her. She called out for help, unable to bear the sight or stench of the creatures as they closed in on her. Everyone around her, now fully engulfed in fear, began to flee as Yun, in her desperation, started pounding the ground in frustration. Each stomp from her massive feet sent shockwaves through the area, causing more panic and chaos. The ground quaked violently with each of her frantic movements, and the crowd, overwhelmed by the sudden upheaval, scattered in all directions, hoping to escape the chaotic storm she had inadvertently unleashed. Yun continued screaming at the rats, flailing in panic as she tried to keep them at bay. Despite the others' desperate attempts to calm her down before she trampled them into oblivion, some bystanders gave up entirely, muttering that she was a lunatic beyond help, and began fleeing the scene in terror. Suchan watched the chaos below with a mixture of exasperation and amusement. Yun's antics had become so predictable that her madness no longer surprised him. However, what did astonish him was her sheer power. Her chaotic behavior, combined with the unusual abilities she demonstrated, was more formidable than he could have anticipated. While Suchan stared out the window, thinking of his next move, a sudden noise snapped him back to reality. The rats that had been lifeless moments ago began, twitching and transforming, their bodies grotesquely regenerating. In an instant, they were back on their feet, more revolting than ever, rushing toward him in a disgusting swarm. Their grotesque forms surged forward, but Suchan regarded them with nothing more than contempt, as if they were a mere inconvenience. Despite their sheer numbers, the rats were nothing more than fodder to him. He stood with a calm yet resigned expression, almost amused by their futile attempts. Suchan allowed himself to be engulfed by the swarm, showing no signs of struggle. The rats began merging around him, their diseased bodies forming a grotesque mass. Within moments, they had completely consumed him, but he remained unnerved, as if embracing the chaos itself. From within the writhing mass, Leon's hand emerged like a twisted revenant. The grotesque ratman reappeared, fully reformed, his body as revolting and diseased as ever. He chuckled menacingly, his buck-toothed grin spreading across his foul face. "My body is practically immortal," he sneered, mocking Suchan's attempts to kill him. His breath, thick with the stench of decay, filled the air as he continued, "You really think you can stop me?" Leon reveled in his perceived victory, believing himself to be invincible. Below, the others who had been fighting the swarm were left stunned. Suddenly, the rats ceased their attacks and stood motionless, their bodies rigid like mindless puppets awaiting orders. It was as if their minds were linked to Leon's hive-like command, completely under his control. The battlefield fell eerily silent, with only the sound of Leon's malicious laughter echoing in the background. The battlefield stilled, as every rat, once feral and chaotic, kneeled in eerie unison, all eyes turned toward Leon, who now stood triumphantly atop the ruined building. His grotesque, mutated body gleamed under the dim light, his rat-like features twisted into a smug grin. He reveled in his dominance, surveying the scene as if the entire apocalypse had been leading to this moment. Below, the survivors froze in terror, their hearts pounding, cold sweat trickling down their faces. The bunny girl and her companion stood paralyzed, unable to comprehend the sheer power Leon commanded. His transformation into the Rat King had drained all hope from them, the realization settling in that they were utterly powerless against him. The horde of rats, their foul forms now organized, kneeled before their master, pledging allegiance to the one who gave them purpose. The battlefield that had once been chaotic with battle was now transformed into Leon's twisted court. His reign seemed inevitable, as the survivors were gripped by the grim reality of facing a creature whose malevolent power now ruled them all. The bunny girl and her companions were dumbfounded that the rats were capable of such coordinated behavior. Meanwhile, Yun, furious and undeterred, stormed through the battlefield, swatting away the grotesque creatures and shouting at them to move. Her frustration was evident, especially as their ominous king, Leon, loomed over everything. With bold determination, Yun thrust herself toward Leon, demanding to know where Suchan was. She was ready to confront the so-called Rat King and wouldn't hesitate if he refused to tell her where her beloved was. Still clinging to her desire for Suchan's chocolate, she made her stance clear. Leon, unfazed by the fierce woman before him, chuckled sinisterly. He coldly informed Yun that her precious man was gone, and with a mocking grin, warned her that she was courting death by standing against him. His confidence was unsettling, and Yun, in her rage, didn't notice when the rats began swarming over her, clawing at her skin. She cursed them for distracting her from dealing with their king. Elsewhere, the bunny girl and the other survivors struggled against the enraged rats, the creatures attacking with newfound ferocity, leaving the group overwhelmed and barely able to hold their own. As Yun struggled against the onslaught of rats, desperately shielding her face while leaving the rest of her exposed to their attacks, Leon stood by, laughing at her plight. He was ready to boast about how his rat army would fulfill some cliched evil plan when, suddenly, Suchan's voice interrupted him. From the depths of the rat swarm, Suchan's calm voice cut through the chaos as he casually apologized for the delay in finding the crystal core. Leon was shocked, his disbelief evident as he muttered that Suchan should have been consumed by his rat army. However, he had foolishly underestimated the power of plot armor. With a dramatic flourish, Suchan tore open his own chest, revealing the grotesque fusion of rats and Leon's power. In an instant, he cleaved the Rat King in half, stepping forward with glowing red symbols etched into his skin. His eyes burned with a fierce red light, making him look almost godlike as he held the Rat King's crystal core in his hands. Leon, even as his body lay split in two, could hardly believe what had just happened. Su-chan stood victorious, feeling invincible, though deep down, he knew he was just another lucky fool. With the Rat King's crystal core gone, the mutated rats become more vicious and chaotic. They easily bypass barricades, squeezing through the smallest openings. Rats emerge from holes in walls, floors, and ceilings, holding the bones of their victims as they swarm in search of prey. One man in the group yells in panic about how the rats can squeeze through anything. As he tries to flee, a bald man, one of the siblings, stops near a sewer grate, frozen as a large rat sniffs the air for its next victim. The rat pounces, grabbing the man's leg and dragging him toward the sewer. Despite his desperate struggle, the man is overwhelmed. His screams echo as more rats emerge, pulling him deeper into the darkness. His brother and sister cry out helplessly, unable to save him. As the rats pull him under, the man tells his younger brother to protect their sister, his voice fading into silence as he's taken away. Meanwhile, Tien is completely drained, barely holding back the swarm of rats. His face is covered in injuries, blood dripping from his mouth, and dark circles under his eyes. His movements are sluggish, and it's clear he's at his limit. The faction leader realizes Tien won't last much longer, and anxiously hopes Su-chan will show up in time to save them. Tien fights with what little strength he has left, slashing at the rats that swarm him. But his body gives out, his arms falter, and the rats seize their opportunity to overwhelm him. He closes his eyes, accepting his fate, knowing he has no more energy to resist. Nearby, Yun struggles as rats swarm her, biting into her flesh. She winces and cries out in pain, jumping from building to escape the creatures. Even her agility isn't enough as the structures around her crumble from the onslaught. Ya isn't faring much better. The endless swarm of rats surrounds her, and she mutters in frustration, realizing it's impossible to block or mind control them all. As despair sets in, Tien weakly glances at the sky. He notices a black figure standing atop a nearby building, its presence radiating an ominous aura. The figure leaps from the roof and lands in front of them with a thunderous impact, crushing several rats on arrival. The dark figure's sinister grin and powerful shadowy aura leave Tien frozen in fear. He assumes it must be the Rat King, and dread overtakes him. Ya begins to cry, convinced Su-chan has failed his mission. For a moment, she wonders how even someone as strong as him could have been defeated. The situation feels utterly hopeless, but the moment of respite is brief. The remaining mutated rats, sensing Su-chan's newfound power, turn their attention to him. Ya warns him of the approaching swarm, but Su-chan barely glances at them. With a chilling glare, he growls, "Get lost!" The rats freeze, terror evident in their movements. Su-chan's overwhelming aura, amplified by the crystal core, sends them scattering in every direction. They retreat through barriers, vents, and underground tunnels, desperate to escape the force they dared not face. The human survivors watch in astonishment, unable to comprehend the sudden retreat of the monstrous rats. Though Su-chan isn't the Rat King, the lingering power of the core was enough to intimidate the creatures into fleeing, as the battle comes to an end. Ya collapses, coughing violently. Su-chan rushes to catch him, alarmed by his worsening state. Yun explains that the drugs given by the scientist were a type of poison. While they provided immense strength, overuse deepened the toxic effects. Desperate to save his friend, Su-chan asks Yun for a solution. She directs him to Leon's lab, where a corpse holds the key to a serum capable of neutralizing the poison. Determined, Su-chan makes his way back to the lab. Reaching a heavily secured door, Su-chan senses an unnatural aura emanating from within. The oppressive atmosphere feels like walking into a black hole, and a thin mental barrier blocks his entrance. He pushes through, emerging into a room filled with frozen, stale air. As he steps inside, he expects to find corpses, as Yun described. But what he sees leaves him stunned. Someone, or something. Instead of a rotting corpse, Su-chan sees a woman sitting at a computer, seemingly engrossed in her work. She greets him as if she had been expecting him and refers to him as her classmate, Leon. Confused, Leon wonders why she's addressing him in this way. He looks nothing like the man she is talking about. To his shock, upon glancing at his reflection in one of the lab machines, he sees that he actually does look like the person she called Leon. Realizing this must be a powerful illusion, Leon decides to play along to figure out what's happening. Addressing her as Professor Xiao, Leon politely greets her. She smiles and invites him to sit down, clearly assuming he is her colleague. Leon deduces that he must be reliving a fragment of this Leon's memories, possibly created by the strange energy in the lab. Professor Xiao removes her shirt, explaining that the lab feels uncomfortably warm. Nearby, a crab lies on a table, part of an experiment. Leon cautiously comments on its unusual characteristics. Professor Xiao nods, explaining that the crab hosts a parasitic organism called Susina, known for coexisting with its host while benefiting from its protection. She says their research focuses on understanding this symbiotic relationship. As they talk, the atmosphere shifts when Xiao moves closer, brushing against Leon and commenting on his physique. Her behavior grows bolder, and Leon finds himself in an awkward situation, trying to maintain his composure. Leon turns his seat around, and Professor Xiao casually sits on his lap, her actions seemingly aimed at pushing him further into the chair. With a sly grin, Leon comments on how she must have dressed provocatively to try and influence him, stating that he's not one to miss out on an opportunity with a beautiful woman like her. Professor Xiao, however, responds by saying that she prefers to practice some chemistry with him rather than continuing with the experiment. The atmosphere grows even more charged as their playful interaction intensifies. The chair creaks under their movements as they continue to indulge in their playful exchange. The lab now filled with a mix of flirtation and tension. Leon, trying to maintain control, pins Xiao against the glass window, the situation growing even more heated in the midst of their playful antics. At that very moment, the moon's strange glow intensifies, signaling the start of the apocalypse. The tension is broken when Xiao glances outside and notices something strange about the moon. A sudden burst of scorching heat floods the lab, turning the room into a chaotic inferno. Xiao screams in panic, asking for the curtains to be closed as the heat becomes unbearable. The once tense and intimate atmosphere shatters into one of pure survival, as both struggle against the overwhelming forces of the apocalyptic event unfolding around them. The tension in the lab builds as Leon and Professor Xiao are forced to ration the dwindling supplies. Xiao, in a desperate state of hunger, attempts to take the last bag of snacks, barely enough for one person. Leon, furious at the idea of wasting precious resources, slaps her away and menacingly warns her that the supplies are more valuable than her life. His anger seems to come from nowhere, and Xiao is taken aback by his sudden, almost monstrous demeanor. Terrified, she apologizes, explaining that hunger had clouded her judgment. But Leon's rage escalates as he picks up a sharp knife, deciding that if he moves quickly, he can harvest the remaining food still in her stomach. Without hesitation, he slashes at her with the blade, blood spraying across the lab. With her body now lifeless on the floor, Leon finds a twisted sense of satisfaction, the last of the food in her stomach offering him some survival in a world rapidly descending into madness. Later, he notices that the rats, which had been feeding on her flesh, have begun to evolve, though imperfectly. He begins to experiment further, using her blood to create a serum that detoxifies poison. To his shock, he discovers that her body is still alive, continuing to change. Leon sees her as the perfect subject for further research, deciding to use her to create something even more extraordinary. Despite her grotesque state, Xiao's body remains remarkably resilient, her decaying form hanging from chains as Leon continues his experiments. He smiles at the progress, hinting at more gruesome surprises for her as he revs up a chainsaw and laughs maniacally, intending to dissect her further. Xiao, barely retaining any humanity, asks if he has found the crystal core she had been searching for, encouraging him to consume it. Leon, however, shatters the crystal core, surprising her, as he reveals that if it had truly been the core, she would have died long ago. Her plan falters as Su-chan regains control of the situation. Her hopes of using him for her own goals are dashed as she curses his escape, realizing that she was mere steps away from achieving her victory. Su-chan, now fully in control, prepares to end her life for good. Xiao desperately tries to plead, claiming to be a victim who only wants to give him her power in exchange for her release. But Su-chan, undeterred, reminds her that once a Salina parasite takes over its host, it also takes over their consciousness. He refuses to let her manipulate him, and with a final cold movement, he crushes her head, causing her to fade away. As her body disintegrates, Su-chan reflects on his original goal, collecting a sample of her blood for an antidote. He wonders what will happen to the antidote now that she is gone, but realizes that the lab likely contains the antidote samples he's searching for. The crab parasite, once inside its host, connects to their nervous system, controlling their behavior. As the parasitic relationship strengthens, the host becomes nothing more than a slave to the parasite's will, furthering Su-chan's understanding of the horrors he faces in this new world. Now, with the university completely cleared out, dozens of refugees wander the streets looking for a new home. Thankfully, the floodwaters have receded, clearing the streets for travel. However, this also means that the corpses previously submerged have begun mutating once more. As the group moves cautiously through the empty streets, they are instructed to keep walking and avoid wasting time. Yun appears noticeably nervous and scared. She turns to Duanya and asks where Suchan is taking all the medical students. Duanya explains that Themutant rat men, who had escaped earlier, now lurk around the University of Science and Technology, making it uninhabitable for humans. The medical students are rare and valuable during the apocalypse, so Suchan intends to escort them to a safe zone in the next town. Yun grows upset, complaining about the long journey and how hungry she feels. Determined, she decides to go find Suchan in hopes of getting something to eat. But Duanya holds her back, firmly telling her she's not allowed to go. Yun becomes frustrated, wondering why Duanya is being so protective and stopping her from looking for food. But for the former chef, it's more than just that. Duanya sternly reminds Yun that if she's part of this journey, she must remain obedient and follow orders. Duanya remembers a moment from the past when Suchan once stood over her as she sat on the floor, vulnerable and confused. She couldn't understand what had come over him. He was acting strangely, with an intense and fiery look in his eyes. Grabbing her gently but firmly, he told her not to be afraid, claiming he was just a little hot and needed to cool off by any means necessary. To her shock, he suddenly kissed her. Yet, despite her surprise, she didn't pull away. As the rain poured heavily that night, her body began to feel strange, and the two of them found themselves lost in the moment, giving in to the tension that had been building between them. Back in the present, Duanya reflects on how wild Suchan had become after that night they shared. She begins to wonder if his unpredictable behavior is a side effect of the crystal cores he absorbs. As the group continues moving through the city, Suchan explains that after the floodwaters recede, the environment will change drastically. Bacteria, viruses, and even plants will begin to undergo major mutations, creating new threats. He predicts that many resettlement areas will collapse due to a severe shortage of doctors, a resource that is becoming increasingly rare. Suchan emphasizes that if they can utilize the doctors they have wisely, they could establish their own resettlement area. Beyond creating a safe haven, Suchan believes that with proper planning, they could gain the strength to stand against emerging rival forces in the future. The group has had some recent success, with Yun discovering a method to create serums and recovery potions. Suchan is confident that once Tenon and the others have fully recovered, they will be valuable allies in his endeavors. Thanks to his space ability, Suchan managed to store all the laboratory's research equipment and materials within his dimensional storage. Reflecting on the crystal core he absorbed from the mutated rat, he notes its benefits. Not only did it enhance his berserker ability, but it also significantly increased his physical strength. The core also granted him ice powers, though he can currently only condense a small amount of ice. Determined to strengthen this ability, he resolves to seek ways to improve it. Adding to his arsenal, the crystal core from the half-bodied female mutant provided him with 2 psychic abilities. However, Suchan is slightly frustrated that he didn't gain the power to create illusions, feeling that it would have been a useful addition to his growing repertoire of abilities. Despite this, his already overwhelming capabilities leave little to be desired. As Tennu picks up on a strange noise, the group becomes increasingly uneasy. Suchan, sensing danger, activates his first psychic ability, spiritual perception. His eyes turn a sharp, glowing red, exuding an intense aura as he taps into this power. With this ability, Suchan can detect heat signatures of living beings within a 30-meter radius, essentially becoming a heat-seeking radar. Through this, he notices numerous mutated members of the Devourer clan lying in wait, hidden in nearby buildings, preparing for an ambush. One of Suchan's group members suddenly points upward in terror. Everyone looks to see a young woman hanging lifelessly from a traffic light pole. Among them, a girl recognizes her as Rui, her former roommate. Distraught, she urges the group to save Rui, unable to bear the sight of her friend in such a degrading state. Despite the outcry, Suchan coldly stops anyone from acting, telling the group to focus on their mission and keep moving. His detachment shocks them. The girl accuses Suchan of being heartless, questioning if he is even human. Other group members, moved by the sight, defy his orders and insist on saving Rui. Several men climb up to loosen the ropes binding Rui, but as they do, a volley of arrows suddenly rains down, killing most of them instantly. The others recoil in horror, realizing too late that it was a trap. Before they can regroup, two towering, brutish men from the Devourer clan burst out from the windows above, wielding axes. The monstrous figures quickly surround the girl and her companion. One brute grabs the girl by her face, licking her cheek grotesquely and running his hands over her. He mockingly invites his companion to have fun with her first. Terrified, the girl begs for mercy, but her cries are in vain. Her friend tries to defend her, but another brute charges him with an axe, killing him in one brutal blow. Blood splatters across the scene as the man dies instantly. The brute holding the girl makes a chilling suggestion. Instead of killing her immediately, they should keep her alive to breed. As she screams in horror, her voice reaches Su-chan's group, who have continued moving. One of the group members asks Su-chan if the woman hanging on the pole was bait. Su-chan confirms this, stating that the Devourers are calculated hunters. Despite the others having fallen into the trap, he warns that they themselves are not safe. The group begins to panic as Su-chan reveals that the Devourers have already surrounded them, hidden and waiting for the right moment to attack. Everyone looks around frantically, hoping to spot their enemies before it's too late. Su-chan remains composed amidst the growing tension, seeing this as the perfect opportunity to test his latest ability, corpse control. Activating the skill, his eyes glow a vivid purple, and almost immediately, a horde of undead corpses emerges from a nearby alley. The grotesque beings begin their relentless march toward the Devourer clan members lying in ambush. The ambushers, caught off guard, now find themselves on the receiving end of an ambush. The Devourer clan, though ruthless, is unprepared for such an onslaught. Despite the horde's ferocity, the Devourer brutes' immense strength and combat skill become evident as they rip through the undead with terrifying ease. Their axes swing wildly, slicing through the corpses as if they were paper. Even with the undead rushing them in waves, the brutes manage to push them back, scattering them like bowling pins. This chaos provides the perfect distraction for Su-chan's group. They slip away undetected, moving steadily toward their objective while the Devourers remain preoccupied. However, the two brutes refuse to accept defeat. Enraged by their prey's escape, they leap from the upper floors of the building and crash onto the street below. Their eyes lock onto Su-chan, who stands calmly with his hands in his pockets, waiting as if he anticipated their arrival. Realizing they've fallen into a trap, the brutes growl in frustration but grin at the thought of crushing Su-chan. To them, he's just another fool waiting to be slaughtered. But Su-chan remains indifferent, casually remarking that the Devourers are unworthy of his time since they lack crystal cores. Instead, he leaves them to the undead. On his command, more zombies rush out from hidden nooks and crannies, their numbers far surpassing the initial wave. This time, the Devourers are completely surrounded. The two brutes, despite their monstrous strength, are forced to fight for their lives as the undead swarm relentlessly. Su-chan's group finally arrives at the safe zone they've been traveling toward, exhausted but hopeful. However, their hopes are quickly dashed when a loud, commanding voice questions their presence and accuses them of trespassing. Unfazed, Duanya tries to use her mind control powers to turn the situation around. Her eyes glow faintly as she asks what gives him the right to deny them entry. For a brief moment, it seems to work. His expression changes, but he snaps himself out of it with a few light taps to his head. Duanya realizes too late that the man is an ability user, immune to her powers. Xiaofeng recognizes the man as Captain Sun and urges him to stop, explaining that these people are merely survivors seeking shelter. But Sun doesn't care. To him, anyone who could make it through Devourer clan territory must be extraordinary, possibly spies sent to infiltrate their safe zone. Before tensions escalate further, Su-chan steps forward from the group, hands casually in his pockets. He addresses Captain Sun with a calm yet cutting tone, suggesting that if the safe zone doesn't want them, he'll simply take the dozens of doctors in his group elsewhere. This revelation catches everyone's attention. Doctors are a rare and precious resource in the apocalypse, and having even one survive this long is extraordinary, let alone dozens. The guards murmur among themselves, and even Captain Sun is forced to reconsider. Xiaofeng's eyes light up with recognition and excitement as he realizes the speaker is none other than Su-chan, his old friend. With Su-chan's reputation, he's confident these survivors aren't spies. He swears on his life that they are allies and volunteers to take responsibility for them personally. Reluctantly, Captain Sun relents. He grumbles that if the doctors can truly treat their sick, the group can stay. However, he warns Xiaofeng that if these doctors fail, Xiaofeng will be held accountable. With that, Sun stomps off, disappointed he couldn't use his axe that day. As the soldiers guide Suchan's group into the safe zone, Xiaofeng lingers to apologize for the rough treatment. He explains that Captain Sun is always like that, suspicious and quick to act. Suchan, unfazed, brushes it off. Compared to the trials he's faced during the apocalypse, this encounter was hardly worth mentioning. Turning their attention to the safe zone, Xiaofeng mentions that the timing of their arrival couldn't be better. The zone has been dealing with strange, unexplained illnesses, and the doctors Suchan brought might be the key to solving the crisis. The soldier leads Suchan's group to a warehouse deeper within the safe zone. Inside, the air is heavy with the stench of decay. At the back of the warehouse, he shows them the corpse of a woman, one of the victims of a strange condition plaguing the camp. Her lifeless body is horrifying to behold, covered in hundreds of small white mushrooms sprouting grotesquely from her flesh. The soldier explains that no one knows what causes these mushrooms to grow. Attempts to clean them off only result in them regrowing faster, draining the infected of their strength until death claims them. Suchan inspects the body and immediately concludes that she's been infected by some kind of mutated fungi. His grim analysis reveals that even plants are mutating, just like the humans, and these fungi can infect and control people. He warns the soldier to alert everyone in the camp to avoid contact with any young plant shoots and to stay vigilant about not getting pricked by them. Duanya kneels closer, studying the grotesque growths. She realizes the fungi parasitically feeding on the woman's body for nourishment. Though disgusted, she carefully takes a sample to analyze later, hoping to develop a cure or treatment for the infection. However, Suchan knows this is only the beginning. The rapid mutations occurring across the world are a ticking time bomb. If these mutated plants aren't dealt with, they'll soon grow aggressively, attacking humans on sight. Worse, the Devourer clan will seize the opportunity to strike at the safe zones, enslaving countless survivors as livestock to fuel their own power. Recognizing the threat, Suchan resolves to protect the safe zone, not out of altruism, but because it could serve his future plans. For now, securing the area and understanding the situation takes priority. The battle against this new menace is just beginning. As Suchan considers his next move, a loud commotion erupts from another part of the safe zone. The sound of a roaring engine and someone shouting for people to clear the way fills the air. A van barrels recklessly through the streets, with a man on top of it firing a gun wildly. It's the city lord's son, and his chaotic rampage sends people scattering in fear. Despite the blatant danger, none of the guards make a move to stop him. The soldier accompanying Suchan mutters in frustration, explaining that the guard team has already been disbanded. The disbandment likely stemmed from their decision to allow Suchan's group into the city, defying Captain Sun's strict orders. But even beyond that, no one dares to confront the Lord's son, who regularly terrorizes the safe zone with impunity. The soldier elaborates further, his tone bitter. The Lord's son views the elderly and children as burdens, declaring them useless to the community. He often targets them during his rampages, running them over or shooting them without a second thought. His status protects him from any repercussions, leaving the people helpless against his cruelty. As the van speeds through the streets, the Lord's son spots Yun kneeling by an injured person lying limp on the ground. With a cocky grin, he brings the vehicle to a screeching halt and leans out to proposition her. "Hey there," he calls out. "Want a ride? Stick with me, and I'll make sure you get something good to eat." Yun stands up slowly, pretending to wobble in weakness. "I'm so hungry I can't even walk," she murmurs, looking at him with wide, pleading eyes. "If you really want to take me out, you'll have to carry me." The Lord's son laughs, delighted by what he perceives as submission. "Deal," he boasts, motioning for her to come closer. "Hop in, and I'll take you wherever you want." Xiaofeng, watching the scene, tenses and prepares to step in, but Suchan holds him back with a smirk. "Wait," Suchan says, his tone calm. "Let her handle this. She's got something planned." As Yun approaches, she suddenly leaps toward the Lord's son. Mid-air, her body begins to grow rapidly. Her frame expands to monstrous proportions, tearing her jacket apart as she transforms into a giant. Her sly smile twists into one of malice as she hurtles toward the stunned man. The Lord's son reacts just in time to avoid being completely flattened, but he isn't fast enough to escape unscathed. Yun lands with a deafening crash, crushing his car into a mangled heap and trapping one of his legs beneath the debris. His agonized screams echo through the streets. The commotion draws the attention of the entire safe zone as the Lord's son writhes on the ground, screaming from the agony of his shattered leg. Yun looms over him. She smirks coldly, mocking him. "Even when given a chance to prove yourself, you're still useless," she remarks. Then, with deliberate cruelty, she presses her giant foot onto his broken leg, causing him to let out an even louder, gut-wrenching scream. The commotion draws the attention of soldiers deeper within the zone. They rush to the scene, demanding answers. Pointing at Yun Yun, the Lord's son shrieks, "She's a monster! She did this to me!" Before things can escalate, Duanya steps forward. Utilizing her mind control abilities, she subtly warps the soldiers' memories. Within moments, their perception shifts, and they unanimously agree that the Lord's son fell from his car and broke his own leg. Bewildered by their accusations, he realizes something is off and accuses everyone of conspiring against him. Frustrated and cornered, he calls for his father to help. A luxurious car, flanked by heavily armed soldiers, pulls up, and the city lord steps out, radiating authority. The crowd parts as he approaches, demanding an explanation. His son begins rambling, begging his father to kill everyone responsible for his injury. Before he can continue, the city lord slaps him hard across the face, silencing him. The city lord turns to the crowd, addressing them with an air of dignity. He expresses his vision for the safe zone, a beacon of hope in the apocalypse, where everyone is treated with respect. He reminds his son that no one is above the law, especially not him, and scolds him for his repeated misdeeds. The crowd cheers, their faith in the city lord renewed, believing him to be a noble and just leader. The city lord then personally invites Suchan's group to stay and help build a better future. However, Suchan, Yun Yun, and Duanya are already long gone. Knowing the city lord may eventually seek retribution for what happened to his son, they leave the safe zone to avoid further complications. That night, the group camps in the woods. Nervous, Yun Yun admits it's her first time sleeping outdoors and asks Duanya for advice, given her survival experience. Duanya rolls her eyes, telling her to focus on more practical concerns. She warns Yun Yun that with Suchan around, there's no guarantee they'll even get to sleep peacefully. Before Yun Yun can respond, Suchan interrupts, his voice sharp. "Enough joking! Someone's coming, get ready!" He gestures toward a pillar where figures are hiding. "Come out!" he commands, his tone laced with menace. The ambushers reveal themselves, surrounding the trio. "Did you really think you could escape after what you did to the young master?" One of them sneers. "There's no way out for you." Suchan smirks. "Escape? That was never the plan. I just didn't want to make a mess in the city." His casual confidence unsettles the group, but they press forward, laughing off his words. When one of the men lunges at him, Suchan delivers a devastating punch, obliterating him instantly. The rest of the group panics, opening fire in a desperate attempt to take him down. Calmly, Suchan draws his dual katanas, cutting through them with blinding speed. In mere seconds, the ambushers lie dead, save for one man who drops to his knees, begging for his life. "If you spare me, I'll tell you a secret about the city lord," the man pleads, trembling. Suchan pauses, his katana hovering inches from the man's neck. His voice is cold as steel. "Talk." The group learns from the man that the city lord has been secretly collaborating with the nearby Devourer clan. Every week, the city lord trades refugees in exchange for food. Outraged by the revelation, Yun Yun punches the man after his confession. He explains that young people have been sacrificed for food all along and leads them to the city gate, where the deals typically take place. At the gate, the group spots. The brute informs the guard that the food delivery will be made by dawn. Without warning, the brute grabs the guard by the neck and violently decapitates him, ensuring no witnesses remain. The guards, it turns out, are just temporary hires from among their refugees. The man, having revealed all he knows, asks if he can leave. Suchan has other plans. They tie him up in a dark, empty street, using his screams as bait to lure nearby devourers. The plan works as two brutes arrive, drawn to what they assume is an easy meal. One brute wonders why someone would be hanging alone, but the other dismisses it, eager to claim the free food. The devourers approach the bait, one punching the tied man in the stomach. However, the noise triggers Suchan's trap. Yun Yun, hiding above, reveals she has been holding the man up the entire time. She grabs one of the brutes, while the other notices a sniper scope glinting from a nearby window. Upstairs, Duanya takes aim with a sniper rifle. Remembering Suchan's advice about the Devourer's tough skulls, she carefully lands 3 consecutive shots to take one down. Meanwhile, the second brute struggles against Yun Yun's overwhelming grip until Suchan approaches him from behind. The brute feels Suchan's hand on his head, but too late. Suchan crushes it effortlessly. With the Devourer clan's forces eliminated, the group confiscates the food intended for the city lord and relocates to a well-preserved house. Inside, Suchan summons a bed and a feast from his inventory. As they relax, Duanya suggests he could conquer a settlement for himself instead of getting involved with the city lord and the devourers. Suchan acknowledges the difficulty of managing a base, but hints at finding someone experienced to handle it. Yunyun, dressed provocatively, interrupts the conversation and teases them for starting the relaxation without her. She joins Suchan and Duanya on the bed, showing her gratitude for his leadership in helping them survive the apocalypse. The three share an intimate moment, celebrating their hard-won reprieve. Meanwhile, guards from the safe zone later stumble upon the lifeless body of the man Suchan used as bait, a chilling reminder of the group's cunning ruthlessness. City Lord Jiang, unaware of Suchan's role in disrupting the deal, assumes the trade with the Devourers went awry and rushes to their territory to investigate. Confronting the Devourer leader, he demands answers, only to have the leader ask him the same question. The leader reveals that 3 of his warriors were killed during the trade, but he is certain they weren't responsible for the attack. Angered by the loss, the Devourer leader demands double the number of refugees as compensation. If the city lord fails to deliver, the Devourers threaten to attack the settlement. Under pressure, City Lord Jiang agrees to the demands. Meanwhile, Suchan infiltrates the meeting and reveals himself. Observing the city lord's willingness to trade human lives so casually, Suchan decides it's time to act. Recognizing him as the one who killed their warriors, the Devourers immediately surround Suchan, confident he has no chance of escaping their territory. City Lord Jiang, believing Suchan is doomed, leaves the scene and hurries back to the settlement. His priority is to stabilize his control before chaos erupts. Back at the safe zone, the city lord spins a narrative, accusing Suchan's group of betrayal. He claims they are imposters who infiltrated the base pretending to be doctors, but secretly kidnapped refugees to trade with the Devourers for food. With tensions high and suspicions growing, the people of the settlement turn on Suchan's companions, preparing to attack. Just as the situation spirals into chaos, a commanding voice halts the mob. General Gao Yiwei arrives, accompanied by Bei Chong and her brother. Gao Yiwei defends Suchan, stating that he's repeatedly proven his reliability and capabilities since arriving. He argues that if Suchan personally brought the group to the settlement, they shouldn't be considered suspects. The city lord, refusing to back down, insists that words alone are insufficient to clear their names. He demands proof that Suchan and his companions are innocent of the accusations. From atop a building, Suchan boldly announces his innocence to the settlement. To back up his claim, he drags out the badly beaten leader of the Devourer clan, who confesses that City Lord Jiang has been trading human lives for resources. The settlement's people, now aware of Jiang's true nature, turn their fury on him. Desperate, Jiang tries to twist the story, accusing Suchan of conspiring with the Devourers to frame him, but General Gao Yiwei silences him with a powerful punch, declaring the truth. Finally exposed, City Lord Jiang drops his facade and smugly admits to his actions, claiming that sacrificing a few lives is necessary to save the majority. He justifies his deals as a way to keep the settlement alive, even accusing General Gao of being complicit by consuming the food obtained through these trades. However, Suchan swiftly counters this argument with a decisive punch, calling Jiang a coward. While acknowledging the harsh realities of survival, Suchan condemns Jiang's actions as no better than those of the Devourers. Turning to General Gao, Suchan proposes a vision for the future, building a new base where humanity can thrive with dignity. He recounts his knowledge from his past life of a utopian safe haven that Gao Yiwei himself had once created, a place free of class oppression and filled with hope. However, Suchan warns that creating such a base will require courage and independence, as survival under someone else's rule means submitting to their terms. City Lord Jiang mocks their ambitions, labeling them foolish for wanting to leave his safe zone. He highlights the dangers outside, rampaging beasts, relentless zombies, and the lack of basic necessities. Feeding into the survivors' fears, he challenges them to leave, asserting they'll regret it when hunger and danger drive them back to his settlement. Suchan counters by offering a solution to the settlement's biggest concern: food. He reveals that his resources, though limited, are sufficient to support 2,000 people for a month, a figure suspiciously close to the supplies stored in Jiang's warehouse. Meanwhile, Yunyun and Duanya secretly infiltrate the warehouse, taking down the guards and seizing the supplies for the group. With this key move, Suchan forces the settlement to make a choice: stay with the corrupt city lord or join him and forge a new future. General Gao makes his decision, unwilling to endure the cruelty and deception any longer. He announces his intention to join Suchan in creating a new base and invites others to follow. Kanghu and her brother Baihu rally their troops, siding with Gao. The city lord, enraged by the betrayal, orders his remaining loyalists to attack. His son, bitter and vengeful, fires a gun at Suchan, blaming him for his injuries. Suchan deftly disarms the situation by grabbing the young man by the throat and threatening to kill him unless Zhang orders his men to stand down. With no other choice, Zhang relents. Suchan instructs Gao to lead the refugees to Shangyun University, assuring them he will deal with Zhang and his forces. Gao and the others depart, leaving Suchan to handle the remnants of the corrupt regime. After everyone leaves, City Lord Zhang, still trying to maintain control, pleads with Suchan to release his son so they can discuss things peacefully. However, this is a trap designed to separate Suchan and make him vulnerable to a sniper positioned on an opposite building. Suchan, ever vigilant, sees through the ploy and immediately orders Dua to neutralize the threat. In a blink of an eye, the sniper's head pops like a balloon, and the danger is eliminated. Suchan then releases the city lord's son, but just as Zhang catches his son, he notices a grenade in the young man's mouth. Before he can react, the grenade explodes, killing his son and leaving Zhang in a fit of rage and disbelief. Suchan, calmly observing, asks the city lord how human flesh tastes, referencing his suspicions that Zhang was, in fact, a devourer hiding among humans. It's confirmed that Zhang is a level 2 devourer, a powerful adversary that Suchan cannot fully confront just yet. However, the day will come when Zhang's luck runs out. Moments later, General Gao, now leading his own settlement, sends a raid team to gather supplies from a warehouse that was believed to be overrun with devourers. To their surprise, they find only the bodies of the devourers, all slain, and a truck filled with enough supplies to fuel their return to the new base. Suchan's promise about the truckload of supplies proves to be true. However, Captain Sun, who had expected a more dangerous mission, is disappointed by the lack of challenge. Tensions rise as one of the soldiers points out that Suchan is now being entrusted with the more important tasks that used to be his responsibility. This fuels Sun's resentment, leading him to believe that Suchan is just a pretty boy with no real skills. He's determined to prove that he is more capable. Back at the new base, Yun isn't concerned about Captain Sun's delay, knowing the mission was an easy one for anyone capable. Her focus is on caring for the refugees, who Suchan had assigned to her for medical attention. When the truck finally arrives, Duanya notices it and warns Yun to shrink down, as they'll need to remain inconspicuous when it gets close. Captain Sun reports back to General Gao that the supplies are secured, and the base will now have enough food. The refugees begin to praise Suchan for solving their food crisis, much to Captain Sun's growing frustration. He convinces himself that Suchan's success is just a result of manipulating people and believes that one day Suchan will slip up and the credit will return to him. Suddenly, one of the soldiers rushes in, reporting signs of devourer tribe activity near a hospital to the south. The tribe, consisting of a few dozen members, is preparing to attack. Captain Sun, eager to prove himself, smirks, seeing this as the perfect opportunity to show the others who the true protector is. Meanwhile, Suchan is on a mission with Bei Chong and Xiaofeng, preparing to raid a military base located near their own base. The entrance has long been flooded, making it a death trap filled with mutated corpses. Even if they manage to get in, there are only 3 of them, and they won't be able to carry all the supplies out. However, Suchan reassures them, telling them not to worry about that for now. All they need to do is get to the armory. Bei Chong agrees and offers to personally lead them there, as she has been to the base before. First, though, they need a vehicle. Suchan uses his space ability to summon his car, which surprises Bei Chang and Xiaofeng. They're taken aback by the randomness of his ability, but Suchan tells them to stop talking and get in the car so they can make it in time. They cruise through the empty streets, heading toward the military base. At the military base, some of Zhang Sanyu's men are still working to drain the large pool of water covering the entrance. No matter how much they pump, the water never seems to decrease. The leader of the team orders his men to find some useless items from their storage and throw them into the water as bait for the water ghouls. Since the city's supplies mysteriously disappeared, they need to find something to bring back, or they will be dead. The men grab a few hostages and throw them into the water, luring the water ghouls to the surface. With the ghouls distracted, someone can dive in to check the place out. The leader promises that whoever manages to pry open the door will be rewarded with a woman from the city lord. One of the men steps up, eager to take on the task. Before the apocalypse, he had neither money nor women, so now in this post-apocalyptic world, he feels he must take any chance to get ahead. His courage motivates the others to dive in as well, preparing to risk their lives for a shot at survival and a potential reward. As Suchan and his team dive deeper into the ghoul-infested waters, Bei Chang's confidence remains unshaken. But there's an undercurrent of tension in the air. The water ghoul's eyes glint eerily from below, and Biang's gasp of surprise almost costs her life. Suchan, ever vigilant, pulls her close, transferring oxygen to her with a kiss, a desperate measure that saves her from drowning. This moment of vulnerability, however, quickly turns into a deadly confrontation. With the ghouls closing in, Suchan unleashes his ability, freezing them in place as if they were mere puppets under his control. His eyes glow red, a chilling display of power that leaves Bei Chang and Shang in awe. But as the control weakens, the ghouls snap back to their predatory instincts, forcing the group to fight their way out. As they reach the surface, Shang and Bei Chang make it to safety, but they can't help but wonder if Suchan is truly human, given the array of abilities he's displayed so far. The answer seems increasingly unclear. The situation intensifies when a white core drops from one of the ghouls. While Suchan seems unimpressed, it's a rarity that most would consider a miracle. This core, unlike others, can enhance his existing powers, making him even more formidable. But the strange encounter doesn't end there. As Suchan inspects the core, two menacing yellow eyes watch them from a distance, catching his attention just as the cat, a bizarre, glowing creature, snatches the white core from his hand. The audacity of this cat, surviving the apocalypse and even outsmarting Suchan, stirs something in him. He offers it fish snacks in an attempt to barter for the core, but the cat, with its glowing stripes and dark fur, outwits him once again, disappearing into the depths of the base. The encounter leaves Suchan both irritated and intrigued. It's clear that anything that can survive in this new world is no ordinary creature, and this cat seems to have something special about it, making the day's events all the more unsettling. This small, agile feline may be more than just a survivor. It may be a key piece in the strange puzzle of the apocalypse. The group continues navigating the depths of the military base and stumbles upon a lever that reactivates the power grid. To their relief, the electrical systems are still functional despite years of abandonment. Before the Great Flood, the survivors fled hastily, leaving behind a treasure trove of supplies. Their discovery is nothing short of incredible. The armory holds enough weaponry to equip 500 people, and Xiaofeng suggests that if they can locate a tank, they might boost their firepower to arm 1,000. However, as Xiaofeng sprints off in search of a tank, Bei Chang warns him to tread carefully. While sorting through the arsenal, the team debates how to transport the supplies back to their safe zone, knowing the city lord's troops could appear at any moment. Returning for reinforcements isn't an option, and their predicament is interrupted by a loud rumbling. Xiaofeng barrels toward them in a tank followed closely by a massive mutated creature resembling a grotesque dog. The beast shoots a laser from its snout, striking the tank. As the chaos unfolds, Xiaofeng shouts for Suchan to act before the armory, and everything in it is obliterated. Without hesitation, Suchan activates his spatial ability, storing the entire warehouse's contents into his pocket dimension in seconds. The once-stocked armory is left barren. Xiaofeng suggests storing the monster in Suchan's spatial space, but Suchan explains the limitation. His ability only works on inanimate objects, leaving them with no choice but to face the beast head-on. Bei Chang offers to distract the monster, allowing the others to escape, but Suchan dismisses the plan as reckless. Instead, he grabs her and carries her toward the tank, ignoring her protests about his responsibility to ensure the supplies make it back to the base. The monster surges toward them, charging another devastating laser attack. Suchan dodges just in time, but the tank isn't as lucky, taking a direct hit. He tells Bei Chang to check on Xiaofeng, ensuring his safety while he deals with the mutant alone. Despite her worry, she relents, shouting for him not to die. Now alone with the beast, Suchan studies it carefully. Its form and abilities don't match anything he remembers from his past life. This mutated creature is an anomaly, but none of that matters. All Suchan cares about is its crystal core, which he's determined to claim for himself. It looks like that's all we have time for now. But don't worry, I'll keep you updated if anything new happens. I'm dying to see what incredible methods Suchan will unleash to take down this monster, and let's not forget, is Xiaofeng even still alive after that tank blast? Stay tuned. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the content, remember to like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon to stay updated.